Yep. Good evening. This is a public meeting of the Lowell Zoning Board of Appeals for July 25th, 2011. Tonight, we have 2 continuances and 4 under new business. We are going to take the order of the petitions a little bit out of order. We're going to start with the new businesses, but before we do that, I just want to remind everyone, anyone wishing to speak on a petition, please sign in and state your name and address for the record. So the first petition we'll entertain is under new business. This is ZB 2011-23. This is for a special permit for signs. The applicant is Robert Orr. The property is located at 1075 Westford Street. And the petition is to internally illuminate one wall sign for a new salon day spa business pursuant to section 6.3 on the zoning ordinance. Is the applicant here this evening? How are you, sir? Like to address the board?
And I'm the owner of Evolution Day Spa, currently located in North Chelmsford. I had been in business in Lowell for many years, moved out, and would like to come back. I enjoy Lowell. And the location that we're moving to is set back off the road some. So we thought in order to be successful, as what everyone tries to do when they're in business, is to have an illuminated sign. The sign is, you probably have the specs there, is a 4 foot by 10 foot, located on the back corner of a building. So we're looking for some visibility and hoping for your approval.
Okay, thank you, sir. Did you receive any communication from Department of Planning and Development from Rachel Kisker at all?
No.
Aaron, do you have a?
Well, we tried to email this out, I think, on Thursday. We may not have had your email address right. I can hand it over to you.
Okay. We did give them a floor plan of the entire parking lot and, is that what you're referring to? The distance from the street?
Well, first of all, I just wanted to see if you had received or had any discussion with Ms. Kisker regarding her comments on this letter.
I didn't, did I receive a sketch regarding? I apologize.
Well, for instance, she mentions there's no dimensions on the drawing to indicate the length of the business frontage.
I apologize, but we did submit 15 with the dimensions of a 4 foot by 10 foot sign.
Okay.
I brought them actually here myself along with a packet of 15 other items.
Okay.
For everybody. As
Aaron,
well as the gentleman doing the sign brought another sketch by.
Okay.
And the sign is 4 feet high in height by 10 feet long.
Okay.
I think I might be able to address Rachel's general comments. If you look on the sketch, she's got 2 sketches. One's labeled sketch 1, the other labeled sketch 2. Sketch 1 is just a diagram showing what's proposed, and then sketch 2 is a recommendation. So what she's pointing out is that the sign itself is now, it's outside of the architectural element of the face of the building there. You can see that you have the Evolution Day Spa sign, and that kind of just sits over the dimensions of what you could call the sign plate that was originally designed with the building. Sketch 2 shows it within that. And she's not suggesting necessarily that the sign needs to be smaller in general, but that it would look better and fit with the building itself, in the facade and the design of the facade, if it was within that plate, that design plate. So the suggestion was either to shrink it approximately 75%, fit within that, or or, you know, bring it down so it fits inside and then lengthen it on the width so that the total sign size could be equal in total square foot, but just so it fits within that plate area.
Right. So, sir, do you have, are you in agreement with the change that is being proposed?
Actually, this was, yeah, yes I am. This is the sign that that is supposed to be going up, the one that you see on the back.
Yep. Okay. I just want to make sure you're in agreement with the
Yeah.
suggestion for approval.
Yeah.
And the other thing that was mentioned was there seems to be no objection to the internal illumination that you were proposing.
Okay.
The only thing that I had read through here was it would be more aesthetically pleasing to have the background of the sign to be an off-white or cream color rather than bright white. You have an issue with that?
I think if you do something off-white or cream color, it's going to look really old. If you've seen signs that have been up for a very long time, that's what they look like.
Okay.
And I really don't want it to seem like it's old because it's brand new. And I think for the distance that we're back, set far back from the street,
Okay.
if it's a cream or an ivory colored or off-white colored sign, it's not going to be that illuminated from
Sure.
the street. And there are all trees in front of it.
Yep. So you'd like to stick with the
I'd like to stick with the black and white if that's okay.
Yeah, well, I don't see where Ms. Kisker is saying that, you know, it's all or nothing. I think she's making a recommendation.
Yeah?
I just wanted to get your thoughts on it.
Yeah. I'd like to stay with the white
Yeah.
if that's okay.
And I don't see anything here, to Aaron, I don't see anything that says that, you know, per code, that we need to go with the suggestion. Yep.
No, absolutely not. I think what Rachel is just trying to point out is one way to kind of soften the difference in colors with the internal illumination. White backgrounds can kind of show rather light in neighborhoods, but, you know, the petitioner, Mr. Orr, is making a good point that it is set back. It's got a lot of trees in its way, so it wasn't a big issue. I think the point that Rachel was really felt that was most important was the size of it to fit within, again, that plate area, or the sign inset, as I think as she's calling it in her memo. And that, again, it's just, to be clear, it's pointed out on sketch number 2.
Okay. Thank you, Aaron. Do you have anything else you want to add, sir?
No, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to open it up to the public. Is anyone here that'd like to speak in favor of this petition? In favor? In favor? Hearing none, that portion of the public hearing is closed. Anyone here to speak in opposition? In opposition? Opposition? That portion of the public hearing is closed. Going to open it up to the board. Kevin?
Just through you, Mr. Commissioner, Robert, I just want to clarify, just to make sure that, I don't know if you just saw these sketches, but it sounds like there's raised paneling above the door.
There is, and the way that the sign is actually designed, if you look at the original one, it's really, there's all raised paneling.
Yep.
It's supposed to perfectly cover the first 2. You wouldn't even see them, any of the raised paneling. So, and then it left the other raised paneling exposed. This rendering really isn't correct. It's supposed to be all the way over to this box here. So if you looked at it, 2 of these panels are covered perfectly. The first 2 is what it covers, and then you see raised panels after it. That was the original sign.
Right.
And then on the back one, it's still showing, the reason you can't put it in the middle of this is you're going to end up with a seam here and a seam here. So if you push it all the way to the left, it's actually much more aesthetically pleasing to the eye, because then you have all the full squares that are left there in the raised paneling.
So your intent is to put it within that raised panel itself, though? so
Correct. It's supposed to be all the way to the left of the building.
Okay, I just wanted to
It's a-
clarify that.
Yeah.
That was my only question. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kevin. Gary?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the petitioner. As it relates to the illuminating of the light, what type of lighting are you using?
I believe it's fluorescent light in the back of it.
Lighting? And what will your hours of operations be?
We're open from 9 to 9, but I only light it when it's dark out. It wouldn't even probably be lit, probably just about now with this kind of lighting.
Would you be seeking to have it lit after hours?
Would I leave it on after hours?
Yes.
I would leave it until my staff was gone, because the last people to leave are usually women. It's for their safety,
Right.
you know, so probably till 10:30.
Okay.
And there are no residences around there
Right.
anywhere. To one side is the former landfill in front of us, and the other side is a plumbing supply company.
And are you going to be open 7 days a week, 6 days a week?
Right now, we're open 6 days a week. Come October, we hope to be open 7 days a week.
Well, I want to welcome you back to bringing your business back to Lowell. I think that's
Thank you.
it's a wonderful thing
I
to
have a lot of great people in Lowell.
have a business that left us for a neighboring town. To see a business come back is always a welcome pleasure. I wish you the best of luck. I would, through the chairman, make a condition that the lighting be no more than 1 hour after closing.
Okay, sure.
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Vesna?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm in support of this petition, Mr. Chairman, as long as we adopt Rachel Kisker recommendation, the second paragraph of her recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Vesna. Sorry, Corey?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chairman. I'm in agreement with the other board members. As a small business, I understand what you're trying to accomplish. I was out there this afternoon, and you do sit a ways back as where your unit is. You're a ways off the street, and you do need some visibility. I think that will be helpful. So I do support you, and I wish you luck. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Corey. Miriam?
Hi, I have no questions, and happy that you're coming back to Lowell as well.
Okay, thank you. Dennis?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
I'm a little confused by your description as to where the sign goes, but I do know that building is a great, I'm glad this is finally getting tenants in that building. It's a great,
Amen.
great design, and I really would like to see signage that honors the design as much as it can. And so I'm excited about seeing the panel fit architecturally to the sign, and so the sign band or sign plate, as Aaron mentioned. So are you going to fit within the moldings, or are you still overlapping the moldings?
If you look at the back picture here, it's actually too far to the right. Because it doesn't look right, if you put this sign like they have it here,
Yeah.
it doesn't look correct. Because the dimensions cut two of the panels in half.
Okay.
So then it makes the whole front of the building look off. So what we did is we shifted the sign all the way to the left side in the first two panels. Each panel is, I believe, we came up with 10 feet because I believe each panel was 4.5 feet. So it's 4 by 9 or 4 by 10, fits in two of those panels.
And it fits within the moldings, and that's your intent?
It fits within this top banner of molding here.
Okay. The outer edge of the whole entrance,
Correct.
or the molding itself?
If you look at this back picture, that's
Looking at
exactly what it looks like, but shifted all the way to the left.
So you're overlapping the moldings?
No.
This is the back picture. Is overlapping the moldings?
See this outside molding all the way around? That's the molding of the outer edge. So if you look at these panels on the wall, they have a molding. If you took and went in between the thicker square, you're going to take two of those.
Perfect. I think that's what you should do. So you're fitting within the molding. Yes.
That is what we did.
Well,
The first picture,
Okay.
I couldn't even tell you where that came from. The one that we brought down was this one in the back.
the first picture shows the sign fitting within the trim. There's no overlapping, the one here, right?
This is the picture that I brought,
Right.
the one that you're looking at on the very back.
And that,
Don't like.
I couldn't even tell you where this picture came from.
thank you. I'm
That's okay. I think we're on the same page as
That's
where
great.
you would think it would be
One-
most aesthetically pleasing, and I agree with all of you. I think this second picture, I'm
Yeah.
sorry to take your time, but I don't know where
Yeah.
that picture came from, which is confusing you.
The use of fluorescent lighting versus LED lighting for your signage,
I believe it is, it's, I'm
Fluorescent
not
tubes?
a lighting and sound, a lighting guy for signs. However, I believe that it's 2 strips of light inside of a light box, a white light box.
Perfect. I'd suggest you look at LED lighting only for savings for electrical usage,
Okay.
as well as longevity, so there's less maintenance for the fixture itself.
Okay,
It's really the light source that people are going to for signage especially.
absolutely.
Is there any other signage that you're looking at that site, at the street marquee? Are you looking for signage there as well?
The marquee is done. That the landlord takes care of the.
You're not going to have additional signage on the street on that big, no, okay.
No, I don't think so. I think we have one side sign, but that's it. It's not anything illuminated or big or.
Yep.
So we might have, like, honestly, Mother's Day, things like that. I might put an A-frame out there for gift certificates, but I mean, I'm not looking to put something permanent. I'm hoping that a nice bright lighted sign is going to give me all that I need. I mean, we've worked hard at creating a business of 23 employees, and we want to bring them back to Lowell, and they too want to be here. You know, this building will thrive again because we bring 2,000 clients to that building. So we're hoping to help that person also get a jump start, and we have. There's a doctor's office going in there now. There's a law office going to be going in there shortly. So we've brought a lot of business back to them.
Wonderful. I think it'll be a nice community of businesses there. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dennis. Well, sir, I think the board supports you in your petition here, and I think you've heard a couple of the comments for conditions we'd like to set. One
Sure.
being the size change, and the second would be the turning off of the lights after the hours of operation.
Okay, it depends, honestly, just so you know. Sometimes we close at 10 o'clock, sometimes, you know, it really depends. I just, you know, I'm about safety for people in the parking lot and things like that, so I don't know
That's
what the
fine.
limits are for the lighting out in the parking lot, but for that sign, I would keep it on until the last person left.
Okay, do we have any other comments?
Nope, I don't think so, Mr. Chairman. So with that being said, I'll make a motion to approve with the following conditions: that the sign illumination be turned off no later than 1 hour after closing. And second, that the petitioner adjust the proportion of the sign to 75% of its original size.
Do I have a second?
Second. Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Bailey?
Approved with conditions.
Mr. Belanger?
Approve with conditions.
Mr. Gary? Oh, sorry. Mr. Bailey?
Very approved. Approved with conditions.
Sorry to get that. Why don't I start over again? Mr. Bailey?
Approved with conditions.
Mr. Belanger?
Approve with conditions.
Mr. Noon?
Approve with condition.
Mr. Perrin?
Approve with conditions.
Mr. Ahern?
Approve with conditions.
Okay, sir, you've been approved with conditions. We wish you the best of luck. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so continuing under new business, we have 2 petitions, ZB 2011-24 and ZB 2011-25. And this 24 is an appeal of the Building Commissioner's decision by RTJ Realty LLC of 301 Chelmsford Street. And this is to appeal the decision of the Building Commissioner to deny a building permit application pursuant to Section 4.51, 4.53, 11.22, and 11.42 of the zoning ordinance. And ZB 2011-25 is a special permit and variance by RTJ Realty LLC at 301 Chelmsford Street. And the petition is to allow the extension, reconstruction of a non-conforming structure with the appropriate relief from dimensional requirements pursuant to Section 4.5.3, 4.5.4, and 5.1 of the zoning ordinance. And this evening, I received a communication from the applicant Dear Chairman Bailey, as a follow-up to my request that the above captioned public hearings be continued, please note that after discussion with representatives of the Department of Planning and Development, it was agreed that it would be best to continue this matter to your August 22nd, 2011 meeting rather than the August 8th, 2011 meeting, in light of the fact that this matter will be on the agenda for the Planning Board site plan review on Monday, August 15th, 2011. Accordingly, I request that this matter be continued to the August 22nd, 2011 meeting, and I thank you and the board for your consideration of this request. Very truly yours, George Ciolitis, Jr. So with that said, I'd like to make a motion for a continuance for both petitions.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, make a motion to continue both petitions regarding 301 Chelmsford Street, that is to appeal the decision of the building commissioner, and also to allow the extension, reconstruction of a non-conforming structure.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Bailey?
Continue to August 22nd, 2011.
Mr. Belanger?
Continue.
Mr. Ahern?
Continue.
Mr. Noon?
Continue.
Mr. Perrin?
Continue to August 22nd.
Thank you. Okay. And the final petition under new business is ZB 2011-26. This petition is a special permit. The applicant is William Scott. The property is located at 150 Agawam Street. Petition is to reconstruct a non-conforming single-car garage that does not meet dimensional requirements pursuant to section 4.5.7 of the zoning ordinance. Is there a Mr. Scott here, please?
I'm the owner, I'm not Mr. Scott, but I'm the owner of...
Okay. If you'd like to address the board, sir.
Yes, the floor of the garage collapsed through years of erosion from the water drainage, and the insurance adjuster came down and appropriated funds to rebuild the garage. And I just wanted to put it on the same footprint and just replace it.
So it's, and this through to Aaron, my understanding is due to notification of abutters, we need to move this for a continuance.
That's correct, to the August 8th meeting. We were able to get the notice, or advertise the notice in the Lowell Sun, but we were trying to expedite this project because we know that gentlemen like to move forward as quickly as possible. But we weren't able to get the notices to abutters out in a 14-day period. So August 8th is the next meeting that we could have this heard.
So did you hear all that, sir? Oh, okay.
Sorry, I didn't.
We basically would need to continue to the August 8th meeting so that proper notification could take place.
So it's just a time that was needed right now?
Correct, yes. There's a 14-day period that notification needs to go to butters of the property, and they were not able to go out in that short of a period of time.
So, sir, who's William Scott?
William Scott is the contractor.
Okay. And you own the property?
Well, technically, my wife owns it, but...
Okay. Okay. Okay, so, sir, it's going to be continued to our next meeting, which is August 8th, 2011.
August 8th?
Yep,
I'm
that's the
sorry,
date,
August
right?
8th?
Yep.
That's correct.
Yep, August 8th.
Okay.
So with that said, clerk?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Before I do, I would like to make one comment, Mr. Scott, that I was by the property today, and I mean, this board is here to help you, but there was a lot of debris in that driveway. I mean, TVs, computers, trash. I'm just like to humbly make a request that, you know, you do something about it. That would be
Okay.
great, okay? And that's not fair to the neighborhood,
Okay,
okay?
fair enough.
All right, so we'll see you, I'll make a motion to continue till August the 8th, 2011.
We have a second?
Second.
A roll?
Bailey.
I'm sorry. Continued to August 8th, 2011.
Mr. Belanger.
Continue.
Mr. Ahern.
Continue.
Mr. Noon.
Continue.
Mr. Perrin.
Continue.
Okay, thank you, sir. See you August 8th. Okay, back to continuances. This is ZB 2011-6, And the petition is for a special permit under telecommunications. The applicant is US Wireless, Inc. and T-Mobile Northeast LLC. Property is located at 363 Boston Road. And the petition is to construct a new telecommunications tower approximately 150 feet tall, enclosed in a 49 by 59 fence compound pursuant to section 7.6 of the zoning ordinance. Representative of US Wireless, please address the board.
Good evening. My name is Francis Parisi, P-A-R-I-S-I, representing the applicant, US Wireless and T-Mobile Northeast LLC. As was indicated in the notice, we're here tonight seeking a special permit to construct a wireless telecommunications facility at 363 Boston Road. We've been here before several times, so I'm not going to rehash the application, but I'm just going to bring you up to speed with what has been submitted since the last hearing. At the last hearing, there were two general things that were asked of us to do. One was to explore the possibility of putting antennas on a water tank in Chelmsford in lieu of building this new facility at 363 Boston Road. We submitted some data from our engineers showing what that would do just from a technical standpoint. Even if we could put them there legally, physically, does it work technically? And we submitted some data showing what it does and what it doesn't do. We also submitted it to your consultant, and I believe the consultant has issued a report to the benefit of the board commenting on that, and I'll let the consultant address that. The other thing that we submitted was an immense amount more photographs showing the proposed location and various vantage points. Let me just jump to the photos here. Actually, if I might step back a little bit, the other thing that we submitted was revised plans showing an alternative design. It was actually a design that was proposed by the consultant that the town retained, and we have spoken with our engineers, and we can live with it. It represents a compromise on our part because it's not as accommodating from a technical perspective. It's harder to attach antennas, but what we are proposing to do is what it's called flush mount the antennas. Instead of putting a big triangular array that goes out about 12 feet in each direction, the antennas are flush mounted to the tower. It's still the same height, it's just a much more svelte design, and again, it was proposed by the consultant, and we will agree to it as a proposed alternative. I think I submitted some photographs in here.
Mr. Parisi, can I interrupt you
Yes.
for a quick second? So for the record, what you're referring to is we received a flush mount antenna example from 100 Louder Brook Drive, Westwood, Mass.
Exactly.
Correct?
What this photograph is right here
Yep.
is a photograph of an existing facility at Louder Drive in Westwood. It's very visible from Route 128 and some of the neighborhoods just off of 128 on the Westwood-Dedham line, but the town of Westwood was one that required it, and again, the consultant raised it as an option. The difference is in the detail. The antennas are much more tight to the pole. They don't project out. What that represents is 3 different sets of 3 antennas. So instead of having one big array with 9 antennas at one height, you put 3 at various heights. It's a lot more limiting from the engineer's perspective, but it's deemed more attractive in a lot of communities, and again, we felt that this was a reasonable compromise. So again, this is an actual photograph of the facility in Westwood, that's there. The other thing that we submitted as part of the package is the original photo simulations that we had done with just the alternative design. So as you can see, this is the viewpoint from Boston Road looking across the cemetery, and that's what the facility will look like from a distance. As you get farther back, you don't even distinguish the antennas from the structure, so it just looks like a tall pole up in the air. And again, from the overpass going down towards Chelmsford, again, it becomes much more visually unobtrusive. And these are all the same photographs that we had submitted from the various vantage points. This is taken from the neighborhood in just to the west of the proposed facility. And again, the pole just becomes a lot less visually intrusive. From Route 495, again, less intrusive. From the industrial park to the west, going down Swan Road. So we believe that this is a good compromise from a design perspective. The other thing that we submitted was photographs taken from various abutters. What our photographer did is and we submitted all these for the record in paper, but I just wanted to kind of scroll through them. We didn't put another balloon up in the air, but what we did is just took photographs from various vantage points. And it's all labeled at the top that this is taken from 92 Swan, looking towards some of the other buildings. And as you can see, there are buildings and trees in the foreground. I'm just going to scroll through these. As you start getting closer to the facility, 78 Swan, what you get is trees in your face and fences in your face. The backyards are very tight to the trees. And as you go farther down Swan Street, closer to the facility, you get trees in your face. And what that does is become a visual impediment to the tower itself. Farther down, going towards 80 Swan, which is about as close as you can get to the facility, you are clearly looking at a bank of trees rather than anything that's behind it. As you get farther down onto Swan Street into the thicker part of the development, again, trees in your face. This, as you go farther back, units 353 and 356, again, trees. And the trees are a great visual impediment. I might jump back to the aerial photo because you really tend to see it well. What this map shows is just the distances from the various buildings. The closest building is over 500, or exactly 500 feet away. The next nearest building is about 800 feet away. And as you get back into the condominium complex, you get much farther back. And as you can see, the condos are built right up to the trees. The site itself is built right up to the trees. And those trees perform a very substantial visual buffer. And the one thing that I just wanted to point out, again, this was the visual impact analysis that when they had done the balloon test where it's visible. And the red shows the spots of visibility. The green shows the parts where it's not visible. And you can see it's definitely going to be visible from the cemetery. It's going to be visible from Boston Road. But as you get to the neighborhoods to the west, it loses its visibility because of the tree canopy. And I think Ms. Saunders pointed out, this site is actually a lot less visible than I think people think it's going to be. So even though it is tall, even though it is a new structure on the horizon, it's because of the tree canopy that separates the site from the rest of the residential abutters. I think it really loses its visibility.
Mr. Parisi, question for you. The example you gave us from Westwood, do you know what the height of that monopole is?
I believe it's the same height or maybe 10 feet shorter. This proposed facility is 150. This site here is 140. Our site is 150. This site is 140, so it's about 10 feet shorter.
It's 140 feet?
Yes.
Okay. And the other thing I noticed is the site in Westwood is a commercial site?
I don't know if I included that photograph, not in this presentation, but it's in the parking lot of a commercial facility or just off a parking lot. But the reason why it was designed that way, it's actually very close to the the Westwood train station, the Dedham train station, right up against Route 128, and just to the east of that is a residential neighborhood. And the residential neighborhood actually goes up the hill. So even though they have a great view of the commercial neighborhood and this tower, and so it was designed to mitigate the visual impact from the residential neighbors.
So what's the distance from the monopole to the residential area?
Approximately half a mile.
Okay. And if I could ask another question, the second set of plans and handouts that you submitted on the ground views, which you kind of scrolled through there. Now, in any of these pictures, I didn't see like a simulation as though the monopole would be there, and I think you mentioned about the balloons per se.
You know, the engineers didn't want to do it because they didn't take these photographs when the balloon was up. So, you know, they know it's approximately in that area, but they didn't want to create a misleading photo. I don't want to say that it's not going to be visible from any point, but where it's not going to be visible is when you have, again, trees in front of your face. So you're not going to see it from this vantage point at 78 Swan. You're not going to see it from 80 Swan. You're not going to see it from 322 Swan because of the trees in your face. And as you get farther back, again, the trees are what forms the visual buffer. So I think the benefit of these is to see how dense the tree canopy is in that particular neighborhood and in the area on the lot that separates this from the proposed facility. As you get down at the end on Woodland Drive, again, the denseness of the trees mitigates the visual impact. Again, from 20 Woodland Drive at Unit 319, Units 313. We basically took them from every building in the Woodland Drive condominium complex and from several of the vantage points as well along the Bigelow Street neighborhood in Lowell and going into Chelmsford.
So what you're stating is that based on these photos, somebody living in these areas are not going to have any view of the 150-foot monopole. Is that correct?
That's correct. And what this does is it substantiates the stuff that we did for the original balloon test, which again, not 100%, but you know, it's going to be visible from a couple of select vantage points in the Woodland neighborhood, in the Bigelow Street neighborhood, but not from the majority of the neighborhood, and you know, from a very limited perspective. It's you know, again, because the trees to the north, you are going to see it along Boston Road. You're going to see it along that section of Swan Road, where it intersects with Boston Road. But what you're not going to see it is from the residential neighborhoods to the north, to the east, I'm sorry, to the west and to the southwest.
Do you know how long the monopole in Westwood's been there?
I'm going to guess at least 7 or 8 years.
Okay. And that's the closest example of a monopole with that type of stealth structure that you could provide to the board, correct?
On short notice, the question just came up on Friday, and that's the quickest thing that we had photographs of that we can get you that quickly.
Okay. Yep. Okay. Do you have anything else you want to add, Mr. Parisi? This
No,
one?
I'd like to reserve comment until after the consultant speaks, but
Sure. Yep.
Absolutely, I'm going to sit down at this point.
Yep. Thank you. Okay. So as Mr. Parisi stated, the applicant did submit new materials, new site plans, new photo sims, new coverage maps, and new photographs of the surrounding area. And they also are proposing a new flush-mounted antenna, which everyone had a chance to take a look at. The next thing I'd like to do is turn it over to the peer review. We had requested some additional information from IDK Communications. So if I could ask, and hopefully I can pronounce your name, Pajicek, if that's correct. I know the last time you told me it was close enough, but.
Yep.
What's the proper pronunciation?
Pagasic?
But yeah, I'm real close, yeah. Okay, thank you, sir. If you could update us on, we received a second submittal from your review. If you could give us the highlights of that, and
Sure.
we could go from there.
The last hearing, we were asked to take a look at the water tank in Chelmsford and to look at that location as to how it compares to the proposed location. We resubmitted the report, and figures 7 and 8 speak to the Chelmsford water tank location. Figure 7 used an antenna height of 150 feet. From that coverage map, you can see that there's minimal in-building coverage to the north of 495 and does not equal the amount of coverage, in-building coverage supplied from the proposed location. Next, we looked at if you were to build a structure at the Chelmsford water tank, and sometimes we do that where we just want to see, is there an impact by increasing the height a little bit? Do we get close to what a proposed location would offer? We raised that height to 190 feet. We use 190 feet because once you hit 200 feet, you have to light the structures, and typically that's not something municipalities like to see. So figure 8, increase the antenna height from 150 to 190, and there was some increase in in-building coverage, but it still did not equal the amount of in-building coverage from the proposed location. In addition, we added some details on the coverage maps, on all the coverage maps, that indicated some road locations to get a better sense of the geography on the maps.
So the height of the water tower is what, sir?
150?
Okay. I just want to make sure I read it correctly. And what you're saying is if you go up to 190 by building a new tower.
Right.
So you're saying at 150, you still don't get the...
At 150, you don't get it. At 190, you get a little bit of
Right.
increase, but it's not the same amount as the proposed
So what's the
location.
difference in elevation between that water tank and the proposed monopole?
You know, I don't have it right offhand. And it's not lower than the proposed location, I know that. I believe it's higher. Maybe the applicant has that data, I don't know. Yeah, I know it's not lower than the proposed location. I believe it was higher.
Okay, so if it's higher,
Why doesn't it cover?
that's a good question.
A lot of it is topography in the immediate area, and it's also distance. You know, the further you get away from a site, your signal level drops, especially at higher frequencies, at 1900 megahertz versus lower frequencies, where you're trying to show, or you're trying to achieve in-building coverage. In-building coverage requires a higher signal strength versus outside on the street, because you have to penetrate the facilities. Because of that, the footprint of in-building coverage is not going to be that great. You're going to reach that threshold, that signal level, where you don't have reliable in-building coverage. You still may have vehicle coverage, but not enough signal strength for in-building.
So you mentioned the 1900, the frequency.
Right.
So I think part of the write-up talked about T-Mobile is 1900 versus, what was it, like 800 or 850?
Right.
So if 800 or 850 were on that tower, would you get the coverage?
Well, I don't know if you'd get it from the water tank at 800. You'd certainly get more coverage because there's less loss. It's called free space loss. It's loss from point A to point B. The higher in frequency you go, the more loss there is.
Okay, so based on T-Mobile's, I guess I'll call it technology.
Their licensed frequency band at 1900 megahertz. Some
Okay.
carriers operate at the high frequencies, some carriers operate at lower frequencies.
Right. But their frequency has a bearing on coverage.
Yes, it does, absolutely.
But again, if they had a lower frequency,
Right. But what you're seeing now is actually recent auctions with the FCC. The frequencies that they're auctioning are up in the 1900 megahertz, actually a little bit higher than 1900 megahertz. There's been some auctions at 700 megahertz, but there have been several auctions up at 2100 is another frequency band.
So is there a major carrier that's less than 1900 in this area?
Verizon,
And what are they at?
they're at 800, but they also, I believe, have licenses at higher frequencies as well.
Okay.
The two carriers that started in this business in the 80s, the old Bell Atlantic days, Cellular One. Remember Cellular One?
Yep.
The phone company got one license, and then there was an independent, which was Cellular One, that got the other license. That was at 800 megahertz. That was back in the mid-'80s. And then when more wireless was, the demand for more wireless and the federal government saw an opportunity to make some money, they went and got spectrum to auction, and spectrum that they decided upon was up at 1900.
Okay. And just real quickly, when you mentioned about, use the example of 190 feet, if you built a brand-new structure.
Right.
You still wouldn't increase the coverage significantly because of what?
It's still, it's not enough.
Is it tied to the same technology?
It's tied to the frequency. Exactly. Yeah.
All right. But you will agree that the tower itself sits at a higher plateau or terrain than...
Right, I believe it does, yes.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to ask about was, I think you also gave some overviews on the different heights of the proposed monopole. I think it was 120, 130, 150.
Right.
Can you just kind of explain those as far as where you're going with the coverage and what the difference is in the heights? Yeah,
what we tried to do was see how much difference there would be if we lowered the structure, lowered the antennas, and if there was an impact. And what we found was when we went down to 120 feet, as compared to the 150 feet, there was significant in-building degradation of coverage, less in-building coverage. In the immediate vicinity of the site, you're not going to see that change. It's on the outlying areas. The footprint shrinks. So, I mean, if you were standing if you were in the cemetery in a in-building structure, you wouldn't notice that difference from 120 to 150. On the outlying areas, you would notice a difference. It shrinks. So,
what's the distance of the outlying areas approximately you're talking about?
To give you a reference point, you get out towards Industrial Ave. When you lower that height, you see an impact at Industrial Ave.
And at 120, is that still above the tree line?
It's still above the tree line, yes, but, right, at the site itself.
You have any estimate of how far above the tree line?
No, I don't have it measured. I haven't taken an average tree canopy or anything like that.
So you're saying you're not sure if it's above the tree line?
I'm not sure.
Well, maybe I'll ask it
I'm not-
this way. Is 150 above the tree line?
150 above the tree line? Yes.
Okay. And 120 you're not sure of?
No, I'm saying 120 is, but I'm not going to tell you how much above the tree line it is or how much above the average tree line,
Okay.
what that canopy is. I don't have that number.
Okay. And when you say you don't have the numbers, that mean that wasn't part of your analysis?
Right, that
Okay.
wasn't, right.
Okay. Okay, do you have anything else you want to add, sir?
I'm all set, thank you.
Okay. If you can just hold it there for a second. I'm going to open it up to the board at this point to see if we have any questions
Sure.
for you from the board members. Kevin?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if I really have questions more than comments. Just looking at some of the pictures and reviewing this again and again over the past month or so, I would have liked to have seen in the pictures from Woodland Park, I know you guys just took pictures, but they're kind of arbitrary in my mind. I can't tell where the tower should be, where it isn't. If you're standing right against a fence versus away where the people live and what they're going to see in their peripheral view. So I see the houses kind of shooting randomly, but it doesn't really give me any perspective as far as what I'm looking at, where the tower is going to be. So that's just a comment. I kind of render those useless because it doesn't show me anything. My other comment is looking at the satellite view of, I guess, looking down on the site. You guys are calling it the photo location map, but to me it's like looking at Google Maps, looking down at the site. Any one of those, I guess, coming out a little more than that, but you know, I'm drawing a circle around where this site is going to be, going out maybe, I don't know, 1,500 feet or so, maybe 2,000 feet, looking at that. And I'm just trying to figure out in my mind who this benefits and why. I'm drawing a circle around the site, and you know, in rough math, I'm looking at 40% of the pie is going to be the cemetery, 30% of the pie is going to be Chelmsford, which isn't really under our jurisdiction, so I kind of threw that out as well. So it only leaves maybe 200 homes that have fallen in this area that are going to be affected, 300 homes if I look at your maps, and we have 120 or so signed petitions saying that they don't want it there of those 200 homes. So I'm struggling with the fact of, for Lowell residents, if this is the right location and if it's the best bang for the buck as far as putting a tower within the city limits. So I don't know if you have any comments to that, but you know, that's kind of my quick analysis of it. Thank you.
Well, I'll leave that to Mr. Parisi to come back with. Gary?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, as it relates to the design change to the flush mount antenna, does that increase or decrease frequency at all? Is there other than aesthetics? Is that there's no
It's mainly used for aesthetics.
aesthetics?
Right.
We did go through a considerable amount of photographs relative to the site, the obstruction, the topography, and it's all relative in time in July when we're in full bloom. What happens in October and November? What's our obstruction? What's our viewpoint then? Could I refer back to the Westwood site? Would that be my only analogy? When I look at that one photo that you provided at Westwood, in the snow-covered parking lot, is that what we're going to be seeing? And as it relates to, as my colleague stated, to the percentage of pie of the city residents, would that be a fair statement to say this is what it may look like from October through bloom of April? That be a fair statement?
I'm going to let the applicant
Right.
answer that.
Right. I'll leave that to Mr. Parisi.
And then my other concern would be to the applicant, as Mr. Ahern stated, was that in some of the photographs, we did see the balloon testing, we did see the simulation in the right-hand corner. I do have some concerns of why we weren't able to put those same photo simulations into the neighborhood pictures. We were able to put them in upper right-hand corner there. We were able to put them there. We were able to put them in that purview. When we went through, it seems some of those pictures, when we went through the actual neighborhood itself, looks like ground level photography, in my opinion, that we're more or less showing the rest of the city what a lovely neighborhood we have out there, that in homes on the site, if you keep moving backward. I'm referring to the site pictures themselves of the development.
Mr. Chair, if I might answer some of these questions?
Thank you.
The one thing that you have to remember from this graphic here, when they put the balloon up back in March, this is where the balloon test was visible from, and more importantly, where it was not visible from. So what we submitted as part of the original application was several photographs showing visibility from various vantage points. What's more important is that we provided this map to show that it really isn't visible from the Woodland neighborhood and from the Bigelow Street neighborhood. And the question came up, can we just give some more detailed photographs, which we did, and we provided about 25 different vantage points. The engineers didn't take these back in March when we had the balloon up. They just took these a couple of weeks ago in response to the request. And they didn't want to put the tower in this photograph because I wasn't sure whether it was going to be over unit 205 or 209 and exactly how far, because the first submission was an engineered study. We didn't put another balloon up. To answer, I think, the chairman's question and Mr. Ahern's question, one of the things you got to remember is the height of the trees are one part of the equation. The proximity to the trees to your vantage point is more important. Those trees right there are probably only about 20 feet tall, but because they're in your face, something could be 150 feet tall or 20 feet tall and you don't see it. Versus the site in Westwood, for example, this is taken from a parking lot where there are no trees there. So even though this particular photograph is, those trees are probably 60 or 80 feet tall, but because they're set far back, this is probably about 500 feet from the site and there's no trees in between. So you lose that visual barricade. And the benefit of the photographs that we submitted, and I'm not saying in every location in the Woodland neighborhood, but from the majority of the Woodland neighborhood, the trees are so close to your face that it doesn't matter whether they're 100 feet tall and the structure is 150 feet tall because they're in your face. And as you get closer to the site, as you travel down down Woodland Drive, some of the higher numbered units, these are the units. That unit right there is about as physically close to the site as you can get. And what you're looking at is trees. And these are the units that come farther back along the 353, the 356, along Woodland Drive. And even those have both the buildings in front of them and the trees in front of them. And the trees themselves become the buffer. The other thing that I want to point out, and you made mention of the fact, it's the height of summer. These photographs were actually taken in March when we put the balloon up. And you can kind of see that it's not the the foliage that's hiding it. It's the distance. And, you know, the most relevant photo, I think, is the aerial photo. We're not talking about 1 or 2 trees in between the Woodland Drive neighborhood and the proposed site. We're talking about 500 feet of trees. So even if you take the foliage off in the middle of the winter, you're still going to have, you're still going to have an immense amount of foliage. And 500 feet is from the building closest. As you go farther up into the lower numbers in Woodland, you're getting 1,000 feet, even 1,500 feet away. So you're getting an immense amount of foliage there to provide a visual barricade. So I'm going to guess that the trees themselves are only about 80 or 90 feet tall, and I'm guessing based on the fact that I've heard other engineers say that the average tree canopy in New England is about 80 or 90 feet. And this tower is going to be 150 feet tall. So it is going to be above the trees at certain vantage points. But again, it's not so much the height of the trees, it's the proximity of the trees to your face that creates the buffer. Yeah, as you can see to the north, where the cemetery is, there's still a fair buffer of trees. But to be honest, the cemetery itself has no trees, and it becomes visible from the cemetery. It becomes visible from Boston Road and Swan Road due north of the cemetery. But as you get farther down Swan Road toward the residential parts, the trees become the impediment. And as you can see, there are trees there along Swan Road at the start of the Woodland Drive neighborhood, and that's where you start to lose the visibility. The green on the map here is where you lose the visibility because of the trees. Not because of the height of the trees, not because of the proximity, but because of the trees and the proximity of the trees to Swan Street. Same thing with the Woodland Drive neighborhood and the Bigelow Street neighborhood. The other thing too that you have to look at, and it's kind of hard to see from this map, is the way the buildings are situated in relationship to the tower. As you can see, the way Woodland Drive comes down, it comes from the north, I guess the northwest to the southeast. So the buildings themselves are facing either northeast or southwest, whereas the tower is due east. Same thing with the Bigelow Street neighborhood. Those houses are either facing due south or in some cases due north. So there's no windows that are looking towards the northeast, towards the site. You don't have any streets. Exactly. You don't have any streets actually looking at the tower other than Boston Road coming north from downtown Lowell that are actually looking at the view. And that's another time, you know, again, what I said about the trees and the canopy, you see it's really not that visible from 495. And the reason is because you're driving down 495 west or east, and there's a tree canopy right here against your face. If it was straight ahead and there were no trees, you'd see it. But we're actually quite lucky because the way this is positioned relative to the neighborhood, relative to the way the other residential streets are facing, that it is of limited visibility. I don't want to say it's invisible, but given the history here, and now I'm going to answer Mr. Ahern's question with respect to where it is right now. I'm not sure if you were at the first meeting. This site has a lot of history. We originally proposed a site farther up Gorham Street on a commercially used piece of property that was much closer to Gorham Street and the residential neighborhood there. And the facility itself, you know, it was a very small lot. The facility itself was equal in height, maybe a little bit shorter, but the lot itself didn't even meet what we call tower height setback. The residential neighborhood was about 50 and 75 feet away, not 500 and 1,000 feet away. And so that was deemed inappropriate by the planning staff. We had some issues with the application, and as a result of that initial discussion, we started discussing with the city of Lowell alternatives. And the city of Lowell steered us toward the cemetery lot, but unfortunately, the farthest away from the residential neighborhood was the land that was being used for the cemetery. So this was a compromise to put it on land owned by the city of Lowell in land that was not being used for any other activity. So it doesn't have any impact on the recreational facility. It doesn't have any impact on the agricultural use, which I think the Boy Scouts grow some or sell some Christmas trees. It doesn't have any impact on the cemetery use. It's land that's not being utilized and is not proposed to be utilized by the city of Lowell. It doesn't involve us taking down any trees or any vegetation. So this is a site that was kind of mandated by the city of Lowell, the cemetery department, public works, and the various other departments that we were working with. So to be honest, we wanted to be a little bit farther north, but because we were forced in this direction, it required us to go a little bit taller. But this represents the compromise between locating on city property, locating as far away from residential structures as possible, and to answer your question, to be as close to the residential neighborhoods as we can, because that becomes a catch-22. We want to be close to residences because this is providing what we call an in-building service. It's designed to cover that Bigelow Street neighborhood. It's designed to cover that Woodland Drive neighborhood. It's designed to cover the neighborhoods just to the west that are off that map on Gorham Street, going up Gorham Street towards Swan Street and farther north. It's the dilemma that we face every day. This is becoming a residential service. This is becoming people using their sites in their homes and their places of business. And as we talked about quite extensively, and I have Brian here, and I think was supported by the consultant, where we're trying to be is, as you can see, the light green and the white areas. Ideally, I think the engineer would have been a little bit farther north, but that's smack dab in this middle of the cemetery as opposed to a little bit farther south. But this still provides an immense amount of coverage to the residential neighborhoods to the southwest, to the northeast, and also very importantly, to fill in some gaps of spotty coverage along Route 495. That area of 495, as you folks are probably more aware than I am, backs up dramatically because of the Route 3, Route 495 interchange. And so there's an immense amount of traffic that's generated, and therefore telecommunications traffic that's generated just along that stretch of 495. Yes, this has some benefit to Chelmsford. Yes, this has some, but the majority of the benefit is to Lowell. And as we say in our industry, telecommunications knows no boundaries. We originally started in Gorham Street. We came down towards Boston Road and Swan Road, and but the goal here is to get as much of that residential neighborhood along Gorham Street and also the neighborhood in the Woodland Drive and thing. We've heard before, and we're not denying that there is some degree of coverage in that area. You're going to hear people tell you that, oh, my phone works fine, and I've been a T-Mobile customer for 5 years. And we love to hear that there are T-Mobile customers out there.
Tracy, you almost finished.
No, I'll wrap it up. But this again is the dilemma: is to get as close to the residences as possible without being in a residential neighborhood. And we feel that we found the appropriate location, given the setbacks to all the residences, while still providing the technical objective.
Thank you. Kerry.
I just have just one final point. As you were filing through the photos, you said one simulation photo was taken in March with the balloon test from the vantage point over the cemetery.
That's taken from Boston Road, looking towards the proposed site.
You stated that you had one photo that you had taken a balloon test in March.
That's what this is. That's the balloon in the air, and this is a simulation of the site.
Okay.
To just take the balloon out and put a proposed facility in.
Was there any particular reason why there was only photos taken from the vantage point of the cemetery and no photos taken from the vantage point of the neighborhood
Because
at that time?
one, there are some. This is the key of where we took photographs from. We took them, one from Woodland Drive, one from 495, one from Boston Road, one from the cemetery. The reason why we didn't submit photographs from everywhere, this is taken from the Woodland Drive neighborhood right there. And in the I'm sorry, there's,
Oh, you had it, Yep.
I'm not sure, you know, it must have fallen out of the package because it was originally in there, there's a photograph taken. But the key thing here is that this is a map done by the engineer that drove around during the balloon test. And he could see the balloon from several vantage points, but more importantly, he could not see the balloon from the majority of the vantage points. And that we didn't take photographs from every point on this map. We just took it from where it was visible. And to be honest, it was most visible from the cemetery, so that's where we submitted the photographs from. You know, this, I think, is a more key graphic than anything else. There are spots in the Woodland Drive neighborhood where it will be visible, and this was taken from the public road. You know, the way the buildings are situated, the way the facility is situated, they're not looking at the facility, they're looking northeast and southwest. I don't want to say this is invisible. I don't want to say this is perfect, but given everything that we're trying to do here, this represents the most, the best use and the best compromise from the big picture.
Okay. Anything
No
else?
further questions at
Okay.
this time right now, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Yep. Vesna?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Council, you said that the photo simulation that was taken from a cemetery in March, was that the only photo simulation was taken?
No, we submitted this whole report here showing photos from all those different vantage points. See those red arrows there? These are where those photographs are taken from.
Was there any photo taken from the neighborhood?
What's that?
Was there any photo simulation taken from the neighborhood in March?
No.
Why not?
Because, to be honest, they didn't take them from photos where they couldn't see it. And that's what this map is showing here. You can't simulate what you can't see.
Why would you, now stated that you can't see from the neighborhood where the neighborhoods here contest that will be, having some visual effect on them and their community?
Again, you can't take a photograph of where you can't see it from. So what this map represents is the engineer who drove around with GPS in his car and cameras mounted on the top of his car, and it's a very sophisticated analysis. And what he does is he says, it's visible from here, it's visible from not here. And that's all we were required to do. We just so you know, we met with planning staff long before the application was filed. We talked about when we would do the balloon test. We advertised the balloon test, which was a bigger requirement than the bylaw requires. We were just required to submit a visual analysis. But in speaking with staff, we said, hey, we're going to put a balloon up in the air, and we took photographs from various vantage points. We didn't take them from every vantage point, but again, I think this graphic is much more informative because it shows where it's not visible from. The other thing that we submitted, and I think we gave it to staff, but not to you folks, and again, because it wasn't visible, one of the requirements of building a federally licensed facility is to make sure it has no impact on any historical resources. So what the engineers do is they identify all of the National Historic Registered landmarks within a mile proximity, and they take photographs, and we submitted that to staff, but and staff was involved with that process as part of the historic review, and it wasn't visible from any of the historic resources in town. So I don't have photographs in the PowerPoint, but we've submitted an immense amount of photographs here. And as was asked at the last hearing, just some photographs from the neighborhood. But these photographs were taken since the last hearing, not when the balloon was up. So again, the engineers were, is it going to be above the third window or above the fifth window or not at all? No one stood here during the balloon test and made that determination, so I can't tell you whether or not it's going to be visible. What I can tell you, though, is that as you get closer to the site, the trees, the fencing, the proximity to the trees, you can see the buildings themselves have about a 3 or 4 foot backyard to the fencing and then to the tree line. And that's what creates the visual impediment. As you get closer to the site, you get more and more trees. And that's what the value of these photographs are.
The reason this proposal before us is because you said there's no coverage, in-house coverage, is that correct? Yeah. And the reason you propose 150 feet high is because you want to maximize the in-house coverage.
That's correct.
Didn't you state just a few minutes ago that there is some coverage, in-house coverage?
No. As we talked about, and if you'd like, I'll bring the engineer up to talk a little bit more. Oops, what did I do here? Aaron, something's happening here. Something, I think I shut it off. Oh, there it is. What this map shows right here is the coverage that T-Mobile currently enjoys in this area. There's 3 different relevant colors here. The dark green is what we call in-building. That's what T-Mobile is trying to achieve by building out the site. It's the highest threshold of coverage that they're trying to attain right now. The light green is the what we call in-vehicle coverage. And we heard the engineer talk at a previous meeting as to what that means. It just means that you get a somewhat reliable signal in your car, but wouldn't be reliable inside a building. And the white is areas of less than reliable coverage, either in building or in vehicle. And the goal here is to get as much of the dark green as possible. And building a site at this facility at 150 feet provides an immense amount of in-building coverage to both the Woodlawn neighborhood to the southwest and to the Gorham Street neighborhood to the northeast. It has some benefit in Chelmsford, the neighborhood just south of 495, and fills in all the spotty gaps along Route 495, along Boston Road. So there's we do have some coverage. We're trying to make it better.
How many homes again would this proposal cover?
I don't know that statistic, but you can kind of see it's the entire, there's a better map up here. What it really benefits is the Woodlawn neighborhood, the Bigelow Street neighborhood, and then the Gorham neighborhood to the north. I don't really have an accurate statistic,
Right.
but T-Mobile has made the determination that there's enough people there to have the demand. And this is both the demand for yesterday, because people already own cell phones, and also for tomorrow to anticipate the needs that people are going to need and use their phones in the foreseeable future.
If the people in the area that you indicated that this service will, this monopole going up 150 feet is going to benefit them, if most of them will come and testify or submit an affidavit and saying that it doesn't have any benefits to them, or that they have not have a problem with coverage, what benefit would that be to the company when most people would say that you're supposed to provide service to, and they said, now, I don't need them.
My suspicion is this zoning board hears lots of applications,
I see.
and you only hear the negative side of things. When Dunkin' Donuts wants a drive-through, you get lots of people complaining about the drive-through, but you don't have 100 Dunkin' Donuts customers saying, I want my coffee. But we all know Dunkin' Donuts sells a lot of coffee. It's the same theory. We don't get people coming here saying, we want the service, but we know the demand is there. We've been selling the service for a very long time, very successfully, but at the same time, there are gaps that we're trying to fill. We are mandated by the federal government to provide a reliable product as a condition of our licenses. We're also mandated, and this is something that I can't state enough, we're also mandated by the federal government to provide a reliable 911 signal. And when you have spotty coverage in the area, when you have coverage that's spotty in some people's residences, that gets affected by distance and by topography, 911 does not get a reliable signal. And the goal here is to get that entire dark green throughout the entire Commonwealth. We're doing it one step at a time. And we've got, in the areas of Lowell where there are already existing structures, buildings, smokestacks, water tanks, other things, we've tried to use them as much as possible. But now we're in areas where there aren't existing structures that fulfill the need. So we have to build things. And, you don't get people here saying, I want my iced coffee. You don't get people here saying, I want my T-Mobile.
I'm not sure if your analogy of a Dunkin' Donut drive-through fit here, because what it is that if Dunkin' Donut, the people who, the drive-through that benefited, usually they don't live there. They live half a mile or a mile away. So they don't live in the area, so they don't have it's not impact them day to day. So why do they care? The people who live there, that's where it's impact. Those the people. So that analogy, I don't think is work here. If that's the case, then I don't think it's the right one. This monopole is the right pole there, because the people that you try and provide service to the in-house, not even the drive-through, the people in-car coverage, you're trying to provide service to the in-house. In this case, it's the in-house, in-building coverage, they said, it's affect me. Those are the people in the areas that you're trying to provide service to. So, and that's how I feel, and I don't feel this is the right fit with the neighborhood. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for indulging.
Okay, President, Corey.
Yes, to you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Pajicic, could you take the podium, please? Thank you. For starters, this is, I believe, this board's first peer review, as long as I've been on, nearly 10 years, and I just want you to know I found your services very brief, informative, and to the point, and it's in layman's terms, so even a non-professional in the field like myself can comprehend it, so I want to commend you there. I'm trying to, put this in terms where, the abutters can understand as well as the people at home. Now, regarding your peer review, now, what I comprehend from this is that, as you stated, is that there's minimal coverage gaps that exist in the area. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, minimal.
Right.
Now, we have had testimonies you're probably not aware of from the residents that claiming that their T-Mobile phone works at their residence. Is it possible that they, the residents, namely Woodland Park, the nearest abutting residents of this tower, would have coverage, in your opinion?
I think this came up at the last hearing.
Okay.
And what I try to explain to boards is that, when we model signal levels and we look at projected coverage, and there's a lot of data that goes into the modeling, and there's a lot of points that are analyzed, thousands and thousands of points. what you may have is, you may have situations where residents, buildings, facilities have hot spots. You could have a street where somebody on one side of the road has coverage in their building,
Okay.
somebody on the other side doesn't. And it's similar to a lot of times when I do studies up north in New Hampshire, and somebody says, oh, I have perfect coverage, or this cul-de-sac has perfect coverage, because they're high up on, in terrain, and they can see a tower that may be 7 miles away and still provide coverage.
Okay, I see your point, okay. Now, in-vehicle coverage is pretty good in the area, am I correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Now, what is, in your opinion, in this rural, I mean, you do have cemeteries, there are businesses locally, which, in my opinion, will rely more on, have personal computers. I'm not so sure they're reliant on wireless, to be honest with you. But is there more usage in vehicle than residential in this case, in your opinion?
Well, what's happening in the industry is you're seeing a trend to more data usage. And you've heard terminology like 4G or LTE. The phone now is becoming more of just a phone. And that's it's another point where to make a phone call requires a certain level of signal to communicate like we're communicating now. To transfer data, sometimes a large amount of data, requires a higher signal strength the faster the speed. And what the industry is doing right now is with the introduction of 3G and now 4G, the industry is going faster and faster. When you go faster and faster, you need more signal strength, which means your coverage footprint starts to shrink as far as reliable coverage for data. For voice, it may still look bigger. I can still make phone calls. When you start to surf the web, when you start to download video, and that's what these phones are becoming now.
All right, so this more is to solve the problem of data more so than voice calls, am I right? More so.
You need more signal strength.
Right, okay.
Right, exactly.
It seems like they have some voice capability in the area. For the most part, they do.
Right.
Am I right? Okay.
Right.
Well, the gist of it that I understand is that, being near 495, a major artery, it appears like this location, in-vehicle coverage is more supersedes, in-building coverage, in my opinion. Again, I'm no expert. Would you somewhat agree to that?
Well, when the carriers that won these frequencies in auction in the mid-90s, their initial build-out was, as you said, it was cover the thoroughfare, cover the major roads where people travel. That's the first phase of build-out. The second phase became, let's cover the secondary roads, the roads that interconnect those major thoroughfares. The next phase was, okay, now let's get into the buildings, the houses, because we're going after a market which is the landline market. The landline phone, the amount of people using landline phones on a regular basis is decreasing.
I understand that, yes. I totally agree with you. Okay. Okay, you've answered my question. I have one question for Mr. Parisi, if he can take the podium, please. Well, Mr. Parisi, for starters, I do appreciate what you've done. You've converted to a more slim version. You converted to a low-profile version, and I do appreciate that for the neighborhood. But according to the peer review, you do have coverage in the area. Your in-vehicle coverage appears to be pretty good in the area with limited in-building coverage. I mean, I'm no expert, but I think in this location, in-vehicle outweighs. I think you're going to have more usage in a vehicle than in a building, in my opinion. I could be wrong. I mean, I just don't. I mean, you must be doing it here for a reason. Your company must want this, but I don't understand what you'd be accomplishing. The area already has coverage. We have testimonies from the neighborhood saying it works, almost every other unit. I don't know what, we're really accomplishing here for all this. I mean, I'm not complaining, doing my job, but You must be here for a reason. Please explain how much better your service is going to be.
As Mr. Pajacek just said, the use of the cell phone is evolving. People are using them now to do more things. You don't surf the internet driving down 495.
I hope not.
You don't text message in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, but people are doing it a million times a day because they're doing it in their homes. And what this map represents right here is the degree of in-building versus vehicle coverage that T-Mobile currently has in the neighborhood. Even the in-vehicle coverage is still spotty, and there are still some spots in the Gorham Street neighborhood and the area surrounding the site where it's less than reliable. What's at the base of this tower is the recreational facility. So when somebody gets injured at the facility, I sure hope that the cell phone works so that they can call 911. That's what this is designed to do. It's also designed so that the people living in Woodlawn can text message and surf the internet, and the people along Gorham Street. It's designed to improve the coverage. I'll also tell you that, from a legal perspective, the government has said that you cannot deny sites so that denial becomes an effective prohibition. And the effective prohibition analysis is twofold. One of which, is there a gap in coverage, which is what I think you're alluding to. And there are several federal cases that say the degree of coverage is relevant, simply because we have some degree of in-vehicle coverage in this area doesn't mean that we have the requisite coverage so that a denial would not be an effective prohibition. Triple negative there. What I would say positively is that we believe that a denial of this application would be an effective prohibition because there is a gap in coverage because of the in-building needs. As the consultant just alluded to, 20% of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has already cut the cord and is using cell phones as their only source of communication. So the people in those homes can only use their cell phone to call 911. And we better hope that
Okay,
we can
you make your point, yeah,
find
okay, but again, voice data is pretty good in the area. The 4G, the internet data may be a little lapse, but voice calls appear to be pretty good in the neighborhood as well on the highway. And the peer review states that, and you stated that in the area. So, in my opinion, that supersedes, data. I mean, on the highway, you shouldn't be on the phone, internet. You shouldn't be surfing on the internet. You should be, a voice call is okay. And that appears to be okay, this location, from what the peer review states. So, I just want to make that point to you. Mr. Chairman, I have no other, I will comment after we open up to the public. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Corey. Marion?
Hi. Mr. Parisi, I just have a couple of questions for you. I think that changing it to a flush-mounted tower versus the other is good. The only question I have with that is when you do a flush-mounted tower, are you able to add more tenants to it, or is it only going to be T-Mobile?
The compromise in a flush mount design is its limitedness. We will be able to accommodate, we've shown the photograph with,
Because now you've taken, you have, I think, 9 or 12 antennas that you
we
want to put
have
on?
3 sets of antennas on the, at each height, and then we still have the same amount of heights available. So we had proposed it with, next one.
I know what it looks like. I mean,
Right
for
there.
others, yeah.
There are at least 4 sets of antennas, so we'll be able to accommodate at least 4 carriers, depending on the height and the weight of the antennas.
So at 150 feet, you'd still be able to do 4 carriers even with it flush mounted?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. And given the way the industry is leading and different mobile carriers are buying up other mobile carriers, should T-Mobile, since it was just actually acquired, go away and not be on this tower anymore, and now it becomes what's in the industry called a naked tower, would US Wireless be able to give a removal bond so that immediately after that, it's been able to be removed?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the requirements of our lease is that we provide that, and we would and I think that's a requirement of your zoning bylaw that we
Okay.
provide that as well. So we would certainly agree to a
And how
removal bond.
long naked does it have to be before the removal bond would go into effect?
I believe that if it's at all unutilized, we are required to take it down. We're in the business of making money, and we're not going to build it if we don't have any tenants on it.
Yeah, I
And in
remember
addition-
actually being in the same business, and I worked for a tower company, SBA Network Services, and we built naked towers all the time, waiting in the theory of if we build it, they will come. So I don't necessarily agree with you, and I just want to make sure if we did approve this, it would be stated in the approval that if a tenant is not on the tower, or if T-Mobile or whomever is leased within a certain amount of time, it would be automatically taken down. Not, you get 2-3 years of it being naked.
We would agree to a
It's a
6-month.
terrible phrase, but that's really what they call it.
We would agree to a 6-month condition because we wouldn't build it
6 months, I
if it
think
was,
that's reasonable.
and
Okay.
the other requirement I think that your bylaw provides is that we would post a bond that puts cash in the hands of the city of Lowell to actually physically remove it if it isn't removed. So if it's ever abandoned for any reason, there's a bond available to provide the financial wherewithal to take it down.
Right, and another thing to that, would it also be possible, and I'm not sure if this is something we can do a condition for, if it's something that we have to talk outside with the legal, would it also be possible that the lease is not assignable to any other tower company? No?
The lease is already in place.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Just so that everyone understands here, there's,
Conditions will run with the lease, right?
well, the zoning conditions run with the zoning permit.
Okay.
We've already entered into a lease with the city of Lowell.
Oh, you did? Okay.
One of the things that I want the board to understand here is the history. We proposed a site on private property. Planning staff wasn't too happy with it. The zoning board wasn't. I don't know if it ever got to the zoning board. We never got past the planning board. And then the city of Lowell issued an RFP. The city of Lowell, through the various departments, park and...
No, I think that we all understand that it's on city land and how it came to be, so you don't have to get into that. I was just curious as to the removal bond and how long it would be, in effect, or how long it would take before T-Mobile is deinstalled or not installed for whatever reason.
We would agree to a condition that if it was abandoned for a period of greater than 6 months, we would be
come down.
required to take it down or, and post a bond to secure that obligation.
Okay, so would you also agree to lower it to 130 feet as it doesn't seem to be that affecting your in-building coverage, or what's?
One of the, that's unfortunately a long answer, and I'm not short on any answer. We are proposing this for T-Mobile. The coverage map showed that T-Mobile needs 150 feet, and I think the consultant agreed with that to achieve the coverage objective. In addition, we're trying to make this available for other telecommunications companies because we are quite confident that when the economy improved and development budgets improve, that other antennas will be attached to this.
Okay, so that's
By
actually
by lowering the height,
you won't be able to have other people come.
and it just,
Yeah.
it makes it less economically viable for us. Two, part of the conditions of the lease is that we provide a share of the increased revenue to the city of Lowell, so that would diminish the economic value to the city of Lowell. And most importantly, it increases the likelihood that someone comes before you in a reasonably short amount of time and says, I need a tower, and you say, why can't you go on the one on Boston Road? And, well, it isn't tall enough. So we're building it to accommodate future antennas to, one, satisfy the technical needs right now, but also to satisfy the anticipated technical needs in the future.
Okay. So one of the things I thought was missing overall in your application was to show kind of more the need on the competitive nature of the industry. So for right now, let's say, to me, I don't know, in order to get an iPhone for example, which is like the latest and greatest, you need to be either a Verizon or a, you know, what's the, AT&T, right? And I'm not really sure, but are you trying to basically compete with those, let's say, top tier in this area carriers? Because right now, I mean, to use your cell phone for T-Mobile right now, like you said, voice carriage, you get it. But if I wanted to if I wanted to switch to T-Mobile, I wouldn't really have that great a coverage in this area or in Lowell per se, unless, you know, the network is built up. So I wouldn't necessarily want to buy, you know, the latest and greatest 4G phone because T-Mobile isn't have great in-building coverage, because I myself or a lot of people, I know a lot of people no longer have landline phones and they use everything. So if I wanted to get a better phone, I wouldn't really necessarily be able to do it unless T-Mobile had this in-building coverage, right?
About 20 years ago, the federal government broke up the telephone company, and that was designed to foster competition, to have multiple choices. In this particular market, they issued about 7 different telecommunications licenses. And over time, other technologies have appeared to kind of supplement different telecommunications ability. So we have multiple choices here. The government wants to foster competition mainly because our cell phone bills have all gone down. In addition, competition fosters development. So T-Mobile is just one of several players in this market. We are the little boy competing against Verizon. You heard the consultants say that 10 and 15 years ago, they gave away licenses to the telephone company. So not only did they have a head start, but they got their licenses for free. And then the government, in its wisdom, said, well, we'll sell more licenses, and T-Mobile is one of several successful bidders. We're trying to provide a competing service to bring your phone bill down.
What I'm trying to figure out is, does AT&T and Verizon in this coverage area already have in-building coverage?
I can't speak for either of them.
The consultant told me? Maybe, have you checked that out?
I can't tell you.
No.
I can't tell you definitively, no.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out, like, to me, like, you know, Mr. Belander said, it doesn't seem like it's needed here. Like, and I'm trying to figure out why you want to come here. And if your competitors already have in-building coverage, I could see why you'd want to come here, because then you wouldn't be able to compete with them. However, I'm trying to figure out, you know, how many of your competitors actually have the same coverage maps here? You know, or is everybody else just not covering the area because it's not needed to be covered? So, you know, it's missing, and to me, that's really hard for us to figure out whether or not you really need coverage. But let's see, if your AT&T or Verizon had this coverage, then I think that would be more helpful to you. But I can't tell because it's not provided, so I'm inclined to say no.
The one thing I can say definitively is the industry has tried very hard to avoid building new structures and to use existing structures. Mm-hmm. And we all know just to the west of this site, at the intersection of 495 and Route 3, is the Cross Point building. We already have antennas on the Cross Point building, and given the amount of antennas that I see up there, I think it's fair to assume that every one of our competitors has antennas on the Cross Point building. As the consultant said previously, there's 2 different frequency ranges, the 800 range and the 1900 range. Mm-hmm. And as we heard the consultant say, the 800 range travels a little bit farther than the 1900 range. So if we use Cross Point as the starting point as an existing structure, and I think the consultant said, and I believe it's true, is that Verizon has a 800 meg frequency emanating from the Cross Point building. They might go a little bit farther. We're at a disadvantage because from the same starting point, the Cross Point building, our 1900 signal doesn't travel as far. So the one thing that the federal government has also said is that we have to build these networks independently. We can't all conspire and say, well, you go here and I'll go here, or let's all go here and let's all go there. different frequencies, different technologies, different coverage objectives, different thresholds, different budgets, different everything, different timing, different development standards. This is what, we are building this facility for T-Mobile right now. We are designing it as well to accommodate future users as is required by your bylaw. We can't build a single carrier facility. So we're doing everything that your bylaw
No,
requires.
I know, I just don't think, I mean, like you just said, because of the frequency bands, unless another carrier, I don't know what the other carriers' bands are, have to go at a lower rate like, you know, like this one, T-Mobile, then it seems as if they either already have the in-building coverage that they need from the cross-payment location or from the other tower locations because they have better frequencies or more desirable frequencies to be able to go further, so it really wouldn't be needed. So to me, you know, unless a new frequency is issued that is lower or kind of more like what T-Mobile has, then it seems like you might get another tenant here. That's why I'm so concerned about it being naked, because I don't think any other tenants are gonna come up that wanna go here. And that's what I'm trying to figure out. Unless it's like a fiber tower or non-mobile carrier.
There's other things on the horizon. The cable companies are starting to develop wireless networks. So there's a need for more facilities. We are quite confident that this will never be a naked tower, and I can assure you we would never build it. The other thing that,
Is it gonna have fiber there? Are you gonna bring fiber to the site?
we will, it gets hooked up to the rest of the telecommunications world via fiber connection. And because fiber is relatively close, it's relatively easy to do that. The other thing that you got to be careful about here is the negative implication of what you're saying. The federal government in the Telecommunications Act also said you can't discriminate against functionally equivalent services. And what that was designed to do is to say, well, we already have the phone company here. We already have Verizon here. We don't need T-Mobile or any of the smaller players.
No, I disagree. I'm trying to say that the reason why you need to go here is because you're not able to go and have the same coverage that your competitor does. That's why you need to go here. But I can't figure that out because you didn't provide me with any of that information, and neither has the consultant, and we can't, you know. So
Again,
to me, it seems as though
I will
it's
tell you
not
that's,
needed.
it's irrelevant to the discussion. We've showed you coverage maps that show that
what you need.
T-Mobile needs this. We've showed you coverage maps that show that none of the existing structures in the neighborhood provide the same degree of coverage so that it would be duplicative. We looked at existing structures in the area. We proposed other structures in the area that were deemed inappropriate, in other locations that were deemed appropriate. And at the request of this board and at the suggestion of some area residents, we looked at some other alternatives, including a water tank in Chelmsford. And we've provided data to that effect. We provided affidavits to that effect as part of the
Right,
application.
I can see that, and I actually asked you to provide that Chelmsford data, and I did review it, and I do think that it does show, like you said, it doesn't cover the same gap. So that answered the question there, and even having you go to 190 feet, which would make it higher, shows that. I got a little concerned when you said you didn't know the height of the tower, which made me feel like, how were you able to evaluate that if
No,
you didn't actually know the
I didn't say that.
elevation?
The water
You didn't
tank,
say that?
the
I
water,
thought you said that you weren't able to determine the height or the elevation that the water tank was at to know the,
no, we didn't, he didn't know the height of the trees. The water tank, we were able to estimate, not guesstimate, we were able to ascertain that the water tank was 150 feet tall. So we provided coverage maps.
right, but what elevation does it start at? But you did do that, okay,
Right.
that's what I was confused about. Okay, so you did actually evaluate given the different elevations, that's what I figured. Okay, so it just came out like you didn't know that, all right. Generally speaking, I don't really have any other questions. I just think the removal bond is extremely important because of the fact that you currently only have one tenant signed up and, right, is that, you only
That is
have one
correct.
tenant? Okay. And the stealth towers, I also wanted to say that it seems as though the pictures, even though you weren't able to do a balloon test, it was helpful to see the different pictures from the different historic sites. The only thing was that you didn't really show one of the main historic sites I consider in the area, which is Kerouac's grave. And you can definitely see the tower from that site. And that is a pretty big historic site as far as either Lowell is concerned, or I'm not sure if it's on the National Registry. But given that, there is a number of other things that are already, built around there that already probably affects the historic nature of Kerouac's grave. But in general speak, I mean, if T-Mobile really does require this, and it is competitively, because of the fact that their competitors already have in-building coverage, I think that's important to build here, and it is a good location, like the site had come down. It makes it better to me if you could go down to 130 feet, because I don't think you're gonna get the other carriers to come here because they already exist other places, and they don't need to be here. But I think T-Mobile, it does seem as if you do need to be here from the consultants' reports. The only other thing I was wondering about, and maybe this is more of a city question, I think it was answered, but because it's a park, it seems odd to me that the city would want it to come here, but I think it was determined, maybe we could find out, that this isn't actually a park in the master plan, perhaps, and that's why it's, I was just wondering, like, if we build this and say that they wanted to build another field, we wouldn't be able to do that. But if it's not really a park, it's owned by the cemetery, that's probably why it's not gonna be possible, because the park's not gonna be built anymore, or it may eventually actually become graves and not a park. So if that's the case, then I don't think it's really a bad location. Originally, I thought it was a bad location because it was in a park, but now I don't think so, because it's not a park and rec park.
I want to introduce Chris Hesse, who's a representative of US Wireless.
Yeah.
And he's the one that's been speaking with the city and the various departments throughout the last year to design the site and the location of the site and where it belongs on the lot in relation to the other lots in the area. So I think he can address that a little bit
Okay,
more.
that'd be great.
Hi. Okay, so I just, a little bit of quick history. Originally, the city, for the past 3 years, working both T-Mobile, US Wireless have done a lot of site acquisition in the area. So there's a long history to this area. T-Mobile specifically had looked at Gorham Street, their application, that didn't work over there. Then the city originally wanted us to be, I think it's right at the intersection of Swan and Boston Road. That was the original place. The cemetery commission, board, whatever, said it's going to take up too much grave space. We don't want you there. Okay. Then they said the only place that was where they saw true surplus real estate was down by Manning Field in terms of this area. They said, okay, we know they put the RFP out. They looked at the cemetery, the whole cemetery area, and they said, this is of the whole area, this is truly, we also tried, just so you know, we also tried to be in the maintenance area on the far west side, over farther north, where the sand and gravel is for the cemetery. Right. We've scrubbed this thing down with the city in many different locations. And, also, I just want to reiterate that in this site acquisition process, a lot of money has been spent. So when you have an FCC license, they don't distinguish between, voice only or data only. They say, this is your license. They don't bifurcate it. They say, and so when you go in to provide coverage, and somebody says, well, I only have a phone and I have great coverage here on Woodland Drive, and the other person, is using this phone or that phone. It's all about, voice and data. So that's when you look at this and we look at the applicant, and that's what you need to look at. But secondly, believe me, we looked at almost 5 different locations, working with the city, working with the cemetery commission as to where we could go, and this was deemed to be the location.
Okay.
So they pushed us farther and farther south. Originally, we had 180 feet, so we came down to 150 feet. So I just want you to know that, we've been trying to accommodate, be accommodating as much as we can and still give viability. Now, and just to Fran's point about, you had made a comment about, you said, well, I'm not so sure other carriers are going to come here. Basically, a site is not viable with one tenant. We're not in this game for one tenant. No tower company, big, small, or medium, is in to just build, especially a tower company. And if you look at what's going on in Rhode Island,
Cox Communications has gone wireless. I know Fran has worked in Rhode Island on some of those sites, and so that's where the cable companies are going. They're moving from coax to wireless because it's a better deal for them. And it's just a matter of time before Comcast will move in that direction, and before Time Warner and some of the other big cable companies. So you got to look globally at communications and where it's going, and not just the mobile companies today. And don't forget about Clearwire too. I also mentioned that originally in this RFP, Clearwire wanted to be on this site. Now Clearwire, had to sort of adjust their build plan, and they're going to be coming back, either this coming winter or next spring. So we know the build plans of the carriers. We're in touch with them. I wouldn't be standing here today, T-Mobile wouldn't have been standing here 3 years ago if this was not an area of need. So it's just too much money. There's a lot of money that's been spent to, sort of funnel down to this location. We just didn't wake up and go, let's put a tower right next to Manning Field. And that's also surplus real estate, so you have to understand that there's not a heck of a lot else you can do with that, because it does back up to wetland areas, so it's not going to be another baseball field or another, that's all I wanted to point out.
No, I think it's good that you pointed out the different needs that a tower could fulfill in the future. I just was worried about the fact that, making it flush mounted, which is great, but then again, it would then make it difficult to put more tenants on. But you explained that you could have at least 4 tenants, even with it flush mounted at that height.
We can.
Which would be marketable to Clearwire, Cox, maybe Verizon, Fios, if you bring fiber there.
Right.
And in different.
It's a priority to have fiber, just because we want it to be the most marketable as we can.
Right,
for
so then
multiple
the
carriers.
other thing with the fiber, which just working in the industry previously, if you make it flush mounted, would you still be able to bring the fiber to it via an antenna, or would you make it run through the ground?
The fiber always goes through the ground, and then it goes up through the tower to the antenna, right? I mean, the fiber terminates at.
Right, some sites though have fiber tower dishes, which would not be, and then the hub
that's
site
true.
really is actually cross point, so I'm just wondering if you would put in, if it was gonna be actually a dish that was attached to it, then it wouldn't be flush mounted, then it would still have to come back here anyway, because it would be a co-location, so.
I mean, there are other applications.
Yeah.
There are some, Clearwire has different applications of how they, and whatnot. So, I mean, you're right in the sense that, not every single carrier is all going to use flush-mounted antennas. But I have known applications where Clearwire has gone flush mount. In an optimal world, I mean,
And you still think that's gonna be marketable, because if this is conditioned to prove that all antennas have to be flush mounted, it's still gonna be marketable, do you think, to you, or not?
I think as a matter of fact, I know it's going to be marketable. It's not a question. I mean, it's the carriers are just going to have to live within the parameters of what's approved. I mean, that's just, they've done it before. So, with other sites.
Okay. Okay, I don't have any other questions, thank you.
Thank you, Marion. Dennis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to keep it brief. I think there's a tremendous amount of information that's been going around here, informing us about this tower, especially the compromises that have been made to date. I think the flush mount is a big improvement, although, it is still a tower, but it is a big improvement over what was previously proposed. I have a question for Ivan, just for a clarification point, if I could. In your coverage summary, you state that today there exists minimal coverage gaps. So you use the term minimal coverage to describe it, which seems to state that there is coverage.
There is coverage, yes. It's mainly in vehicle coverage is what's there.
Well, the point I'm trying to make is it enough coverage that we could do without the tower?
If you were speaking about vehicles and you said, okay, vehicle coverage is minimal coverage gaps with respect to vehicle coverage.
How about safety in homes for 911 calls?
The in-building coverage is a lot worse than the in-vehicle coverage as far as what exists today.
Can you say that it doesn't adequately meet what's required to have a safe 911 call in home?
For the areas that they've targeted for in-building coverage, my analysis shows that there is not adequate in-building coverage.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Dennis. Well, I know this is kind of going on, but I guess I got to ask a few questions now, and I'm going to open it up to the public after I'm finished. I heard a couple of things. I think, Mr. Parisi, you mentioned this, that the city mandated the site to U.S. Wireless. And I heard the other gentleman talking about working with the city and excess inventoriable sites that the city owned. But when you use the term mandated, what are you trying to say by mandated?
I don't think I said they mandated.
No, I specifically heard mandated, the city mandated.
They told us where to go on this lot, as opposed to farther north, which was really more towards the center of where we wanted to be.
Correct, and this gentleman mentioned about a couple of different sites. It didn't sound like the proximity was that far as, I think you mentioned Swan and Boston Road.
The city owns lots of lots in this
Correct.
area. They own the
Correct.
lots to the north of Boston, to the west of Boston,
Yep.
to the east of Boston. And it was, in determining that the Gorham Street area was not an appropriate location, representatives of various
But
people said.
my question is, when you said mandated, what did you mean by mandated, the city mandated?
They said to go here as opposed to anywhere else in the neighborhood.
Okay, so are you stating that the city was limited in their site selection that you needed to choose from?
They issue the RFP. They're the landowner. They tell us where they
Okay.
want us to go.
Correct. I just want to understand when you said mandated, because to me, mandated means you were told to, as opposed to, and I understand the RFP process. That's why I want to be definitive on what mandated meant.
We tried to talk to commercial landowners on Gorham Street, and the planning board said no. So
Okay.
we were encouraged to speak to the city, and the city, who owns the majority of this land in this area, said, go here. Not farther north, not across Swan, not across Boston, go here.
Okay. Something else that you had mentioned was, and I'm probably going to need to ask another question of the peer reviewer, but you were talking about the proximity to the trees was impacting, I'll say, the height. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
If you look at this map here, you can kind of see where the buildings are in the Woodland Road neighborhood. And the buildings closest to the site, there's a building about 500 feet away from the site. And those folks have about a 4-foot backyard and then a wall of trees in their face. So even if they could look out their back window, what they see is a wall of trees. That wall of trees is 500 feet thick, so that even if all the leaves are off the trees, they have 500 feet of trees and forest in between this site and the proposed and theirs. That's what I'm talking about. The folks standing in the cemetery to the north don't have trees in their face, so they get a more visual vantage point. But the advantage of this site in proximity to the Woodlawn or the Woodward Road neighborhood is that there is the trees both in density and in proximity to the residences. That's the real benefit.
So if I played a what if there were no trees at all there, what would be the height of the tower? Does anybody can determine that with no trees?
The tower is 150 feet. It has to be above the trees.
Okay, so you're saying, I just asked if there were no trees there at all, what would the height of the tower be at that point if there was no tree coverage?
The height of the tower is 150 feet. My point, and I've said along, this is a great graphic.
No, I asked if there's no trees at all, a what-if scenario. If there were no trees there at all, what would the height of the tower, what would the height of the tower be
Meaning,
required?
what would the visibility of the tower be? The tower is 150 feet, is 150 feet, is 150 feet. But what I'm saying is...
Sir, if you want to address the board, please address it. I don't need you to go up, and you can address us if you want. Okay, thank you.
My point is that if you've got a tree in your face, whether the tower is 150 feet or 120 feet or 100 feet, it doesn't matter, because you have a tree in your face.
Okay, so the answer to your question is the monopole is going to be 150 feet, whether there's trees or not.
It's going to be 150
Okay,
feet from
thank
every
you.
vantage point.
Next question, when it goes to co-location, and you had mentioned there could be potentially up to 3 more locators, if I have that correct.
Correct.
Be T-Mobile plus 3 more. What's the arrangements on, obviously, the city's receiving some remuneration for you people to rent. What happens to the other co-locators? How is that handled?
I was not party to that, but what I believe is that the initial rent, the base rent, includes 1 co-locator, T-Mobile. As we add more antennas, a percentage of the increased rent that we get from the tenants gets passed through to the city.
A percentage?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay. And again, the other point I wanted to make was, again, you're at 1,800 megahertz, not 800, correct?
1,900, yes.
Excuse me, 1,900. Okay. Thank you. I'm going to open it up to the public now.
I'd like to reserve the right to sum up when the public has had a chance to speak.
Yep. Okay, is there anyone here that'd like to speak in opposition to this petition, in opposition? And the other thing I would ask respectfully is, if you've spoken before the board previously, we have, not a time constraint, but obviously it's been a long process here. If you could please try to make it as short as possible, but to the point, I would respectfully request that. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Raymond Weicker on behalf of the Manning Field Neighborhood Association. I'm here on behalf of people. I've introduced myself before and expressed their opposition. I would point out a few things that I would ask the board to review and reconsider when looking at the information that has previously been submitted as compared to what is submitted here today. When this board was originally presented with this proposal back in May, there was a proposal for what the coverage would be with a 130-foot co-location on the existing Comcast tower, and it did show that it provided coverage to everything east of the cemeteries. So what we're really talking about here is how much coverage is going to be provided with the Woodlawn neighborhood, and that is what is here. And I'll just ask to be able to hand this forward.
Thank you, sir.
I'd also like to hand out for our 2 Google Maps.
Cool. Okay, so Mr. Weicker has submitted to the board existing coverage in Lowell, Mass. With Comcast Tower at 130 feet and 2 Google Map shots of the area.
And Mr. Chairman, I guess when we were here in May, the residents raised some strenuous objection to the claimed gap in coverage. There was a misstatement of the law that was made earlier regarding how the federal courts proceed with the gap. It's not enough to show that there is just simply a estimated gap based upon a computer simulation. It requires an actual gap and a demonstration that the gap is in fact significant, meaning that it affects a significant number of users. What we have is uncontroverted testimony that the actual readings in the area show that there is no gap. I will bring forward one of the residents who did do what the applicant has not done. He actually took readings in the neighborhood using appropriate device to register the decibel meter. Well, he'll go into it. He's a little more technical than I am. But where we actually have actual measurements showing that there is in-building coverage and a computer simulation which claims there is no coverage or unreliable coverage, at least with respect to the area immediately adjacent to the proposed location, we've had neighbors previously testify that they have complete in-building coverage in those areas that are listed as white or spotty zones. So we know for a fact that the proposed projected map is inaccurate, but we will have actual data being submitted. What we still have is an incomplete application, and I think this has been touched upon. While we do have some nice shots of the neighborhood in full bloom during the summer, we still have a missing required series of photo simulations from all adjacent properties. That's required under the Lowell bylaws for the application. The applicant submitted a letter to the city saying that they would do it, and they haven't. And we've had 2 months of continuances, and they still haven't done the required photo simulations. This board is perfectly within its legal rights to reject the application as incomplete. Right there on its face, make no other findings. However, if the board wants to go on, it can actually look at the actual gap in coverage and make a determination as to whether it's significant. I will argue and I will submit to you that by the applicant's own data, a location of 130 feet on the existing Comcast tower will cover almost all of what they claim to be a gap, other than what they're claiming exists in the immediate adjacent neighborhood of the abutters. And I will let the abutters testify to their own actual readings with respect to this. But based on that, this board can itself find that there is no significant gap. It can find that the gap is just limited to this very small neighborhood, and that in itself is not significant based upon it. To claim that there is no 911 service in the area is fear-mongering at its absolute lowest and worst form. You'll hear from the neighbors. They'll tell you what their coverage is because they've already submitted photographs of their phones working inside their buildings and in the neighborhood. I'm actually going to ask if I can reserve at this point to speak further until such time as the actual neighbors have spoken. I'd just like to sum up at that point.
Okay, Mr. Waker.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak in opposition?
Hi, Jim Collins, 33 Dunstan Road, Chelmsford, Mass. I'm someone who's spoken previously. I'm a T-Mobile customer, and have indicated that I'm a long-term customer, and I've never had a problem with my phone in the area. There's been, some questions brought up by the attorney and the engineers that information may be inaccurate. So I spent some time this weekend with a very modern smartphone. I actually went out and bought a new phone. It just came out in June, became available on T-Mobile, just so that there'd be no objections by U.S. Wireless that I'm using an older phone and I'm getting better results as a result of this. I took this smartphone, loaded up an application on there that records the signal strength and uploads that signal strength as you drive around or you go into someone's house to a website. So not only does it let you know that you have signal, there's no gap there, it also uses data services to actually publish the data up to the internet. And I'd like to submit the map with the numbers and just some information on this data. The way the signal strength is measured, as the T-Mobile engineers have mentioned in the past, the closer to zero you are, the better the strength. In this map, it actually is color-coded, so the darker green, the better. And not only is this data includes, data that I had driving around the area, including Woodland Park. I actually stopped in 3 homes of residents of Woodland Park and recorded the signal numbers there. And I'd like to submit this to you now, if I could.
Sure. Pridge. It is. Okay. Thank you.
In no...
Do you have an extra copy of that? Do you have an extra copy?
I do
Or is this
not.
the only
My
one?
apologies for that. I made one copy.
Mr. Parisi, do you want to take a look at this also?
I heard, excuse me, sir, you own a cell phone. Could I hear your qualifications to produce this data, please?
Sorry, I didn't know.
I'm actually a network engineer who has been in the internet industry for 20 years. I don't deal specifically in wireless, but anything that has to do with internet technologies, the TCP/IP protocol, which this application actually uses, it records the signal data from the phone. This is an Android phone. It's HTC Sensation from T-Mobile. If anyone wants to examine it, it is definitely a T-Mobile phone. All the application does is take the signal information, which the Android phone makes available, and submit that data up to a website, which you can then produce maps of the signal strength using Google Maps.
Good.
And if the board wants further information about the application I used, I can submit that easily.
Okay, so this is based on your own, I guess I'll call it, your own applications that you were able to reproduce this?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, it's very simple. The application, I mean, anyone can do this. If you had a phone that runs an Android operating system, this is this app you can get from the Android market, and you can drive around and have it send this data up to the website that's associated with the software manufacturer who produced the app.
Okay, so I'm going to have each of the board members at least take a look at it, and then Mr. Parisi, I'll let you take a look at it.
So, what this data shows is that there's no real gap. I mean, you can make phone calls, you could even submit data in this area. The scale that US Wireless is using in their maps is so stringent that, to get what they call in-building coverage, you'd have to be literally a couple blocks away from an antenna. And, so that's showing reality, I've never had a problem calling with my old phone, and I've never had a problem so far calling with this phone. In fact, I made phone calls in some of the homes that that are referenced on that map there, and there was no problem with the call. I mean, I could come up, produce a map for you, we consider it in-building coverage if we have a signal, strength greater than 60. And the only way you're going to get that is if you're literally standing next to an antenna. I mean, they have, their maps are sort of not in the reality of the users of the phone. And, like I said, in nowhere during my driving around did I get to a point where the application told me there's no signal. Okay. The other thing I wanted to mention is that, this new phone, which I went and got out just for this purpose, right? Spent a bunch of money just so I can do that testing and not have any complaints that I'm using an old phone. This phone also has something called Wi-Fi calling. What that is, if you have a broadband provider like Comcast or Fios, and Chelmsford either is available now, we're kind of lucky. I have a Comcast internet account. I've had them for a very long time. You can have a wireless access point in your house. The phone can attach to that wireless access point. You can make cell phone calls. You can do all your data. It'll never use the T-Mobile towers at all. In fact, it actually this phone turns off the radio that would connect to the towers, and it entirely uses your wireless access point to do both phone calls and data. And that's sort of where the future is going, right? Because people who are real technologists and use lots of data services like I do, they're never going to be satisfied with what the cell towers are going to give us. They're going to have their own broadband cable or fiber optic like Fios. They're going to have wireless access points, and they could use that for both calling and data, and they don't have to rely on the cell providers' towers. Further, if you look at, as Mr. Weicker had mentioned, their own maps that have been submitted, like if you look, east of the Concord River, there's parts of Lowell there that, per their maps, are not covered. They're in sort of low coverage, either gaps or in-vehicle coverage only. The best coverage of any of the maps they've submitted for that area is actually the Comcast tower. And they haven't really addressed the fact that they claim that they're doing something good for southern Lowell, but the tower that's basically on the Chelmsford Lowell line is actually not going to give them the best coverage. Using an existing facility would actually give them a better coverage. I'm a member also of the East Chelmsford Water District, which is this water tower on Carlisle Street that's been discussed a number of times. I actually talked to Ronald Pear, who's the chairman of the East Chelmsford Water District, today. I asked him about the existing tower, whether it had in fact attachments for cell antennas, and he indicated it does have what he called ears for attaching cell antennas, and they built it that way with the intention of possibly having antennas on the tower in the future. I asked him if the board had any objection to the tower being used for cell services. He said they do not. I asked him what the process would be for someone who wanted to get onto the tower would be, and he said that issue would have to come before the members of the East Chelmsford Water District at a meeting. It could either be a special meeting called just for that purpose, or it could be the annual meeting, and members of the Water District like myself would vote on that. So that is definitely still an option for them, and that goes to the fact that, again, there's existing facilities that they could consider that haven't really been that haven't been seriously considered. As I mentioned earlier, I've been in internet technology for 20 years. I was an early employee at a company called PSINet. They were the first commercial internet provider. There's almost no internet technology that I haven't managed or been significantly involved in the last 20 years. And so I'm the type of person who really wants great data capabilities, wants the high data rates and that sort of thing, which they're claiming this tower is necessary for. But I have never in my life forced or wanted to force upon people something they didn't want just so internet technologies could advance. When we put fiber optic cables down, we didn't demand that we bulldozer down people's houses so we can get the fiber optic lines in the minimum distance so it'd be cheapest for us to do it. We went along interstates and highways, and we used existing capabilities, and we tried to do it in the most unintrusive way possible. We have to ask, there's a philosophical issue here, and I understand there's the FCC laws and such, but I mean, at what point do we say this is too much? They have to spend a little more money to get some either smaller towers that people don't object to, or go into additional sites like church steeples and things like this. And it isn't the best for them and financially, but it is an option for them. And if I was someone who was running a company like T-Mobile, I would definitely be considering that. If you look at the other providers in the area, like Verizon, there was a question, would Verizon want to go there, right? This is my BlackBerry for my company, company paid. I don't get a choice of what carriers on here. They use Verizon. I'm like 10,000 emails a day, tons of web browsing on this thing, tons of phone calls from my house. Verizon has excellent data and voice coverage in this neighborhood. And they do it without a 150-foot tower at Manning Road, right? If they can do it, so can T-Mobile. It may cost them a little more, but they can do it. Okay. And that's all I'd say.
right,
I
sir.
hope you take this into consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else in opposition? Yes, sir.
Dan Cresson, 5 Manning Road, Chelmsford. It was pretty much touched upon by several of the board members, but I just wanted to put kind of a finer point on the additional photo simulations so-called simulations that they provided are really useless because they don't show the tower. And for a larger point, one of the major concerns of many of the residents is the impact on property values. There's a game that parents like to play with newborns called peekaboo, which is fun for the kids because as soon as their eyes are covered up, they don't remember that their parent is actually there. But as soon as the eyes come out, it's the same thing with this. Just because I can stand behind one tree or stick my thumb out and not be able to see you, that doesn't make you disappear. And so if I'm in the area for 5 minutes and I've seen the tower, it doesn't slip my mind that, oh yeah, I might not want to buy this house because it's less than a quarter mile from a cell tower. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
My name is Bill Lunt, 80 Swan Street, Unit 225. I've spoken before, I've shown you pictures that show that the cell phone does work in my house, T-Mobile. I'm actually the abutter that's closest on the map there, shown that's 500 feet away. I was very disappointed that the photo simulates are inadequate again. I will say that when you do look at that building, which is a 2-story building with a small attic, which is probably 35 foot tall, and you look at the small amount of trees that are above that, you're seeing a 50-foot, 60-foot max with could easily see a 150-foot tower beyond that. I don't believe the cell tower is needed. I also don't believe that the ratio of people that are against the cell tower and have signed petitions in opposition and have shown up here many, many times outweighs the number of people that could possibly benefit from it. Meaning people that are in the Woodland Park area. In the other neighborhood behind me, frankly, it's mostly Chelmsford. I think there's 7 houses that are in Lowell in that neighborhood. I also believe that spotty data coverage really doesn't impede a 911 call. I think that's just poor. I also wanted to mention that I have heard that there was a request for a cell tower by people that want cell towers right down the street from me in Industrial Avenue. There's plenty of room to put very tall structures, and I believe that that matches the character and area of Industrial Ave. I believe that the 150-foot monopole or monstrosity really doesn't match the character of the historic area of Lowell or our residential neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else like to speak in opposition? Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. My name is Susan Bogrowski. I live at Woodland Park, Swan Street. I actually live in the smaller section that faces the cemetery with the least amount of trees. A couple things I want to mention. I have mentioned this before, but the day of the photo simulation on March 17th, when I came off the Lowell connector on the Industrial Ave exit, you come down, I take a left to go to Woodland Park. That day, I specifically remember looking left, and I could look up above the gas company that's on the left-hand side there. I could see the balloon above the gas company area there. So I just wanted to mention that. The other thing is, I'm very surprised that they are allowed to mention that they didn't do another balloon test because they didn't want to. That does not make any sense to me. So they came and presented pictures that are skewed to their view of what they think Woodland Park would be looking at. Since we don't have a model there to look at or represent what these pictures are showing, we have no idea where the actual tower will be in these photos that they are presenting. Especially one from 92 Swan Street. They took it from the very edge of the building and moved the camera to the farthest point, which has a good amount of trees. If they took a picture further to the left, there's an opening there. And if you were standing at that position where they took the photo, you would have a clear shot at where the tower probably will be, not where they're saying it's going to be with that photo. The other thing I want to talk about is the building closest to the cemetery. There is a fence, a stockade fence there. Again, their pictures are right up against a fence. Of course, there are a few trees there, but people living in that building, they are further away from that stockade fence. They're further away from those trees. They all have sliders and windows on the backside of the building, and their view is directly into the cemetery, which is wide open, and also to that area where the proposed tower will be definitely something they'd be looking at every single day from the inside of their building. And also, people have decks on the outside of these buildings. They spend a lot of time outside. I again, the decks aren't right up against a stockade fence. They're up against a building. And they're also elevated off the ground. So again, they're up higher and they have a better shot at what the proposed tower area will be. So I just want to point that out to you. I strongly urge that these photos are inaccurate. They're not really true representation of what the view from Woodland Park would be. So please consider that. I do appreciate the newer version of the tower. One thing I would suggest, if this does get approved, and obviously I would not want that, but also to put in a condition that they also use a camouflage on this tower. I've seen many towers that have camouflage that they put look like a tree. In that particular area over by the cemetery, there are big, huge pine trees over it. There's like 4 or 5 of them that line the cemetery, West Lawn Cemetery 2 versus the Boy Scout area where they plant their trees. I would suggest that they camouflage that tower, if this goes through, to look like one of those trees. So it would blend into the area, so it wouldn't be just a tower to be looking at from the cemetery, and also from, you know, the ballpark. And people driving up and down Boston Road or any other part of the city in that area, as well as maybe, they say you can't see it from 495. We don't know that. So anyway, thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Anyone else like to speak in opposition? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Gay Rinker, Woodland Park. I live in what Sue described as one of the units right in back of the cemetery. In the pictures where we're supposed to just look out and look at the trees, if I look up, which I look up at the clouds, I would see the tower. I spend a lot of time on my deck, which is living space year-round. The decks weren't taken in any of the photographs. Just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else like to speak in opposition? Yes, sir.
Ken Harkins, 110 Bigelow Street. I want to say thank you for giving up your time at home to listen to this, and I appreciate that. To correct one thing real quick is, for her, T-Mobile is going to be taken over by AT&T. AT&T has a antenna sitting right down at UPS, the Brown Boys. When they take over T-Mobile, what's going to happen to this one? But also looking at one of his pictures, his nice picture there, he showed the antenna and all the greenery and everything. Those pictures, those decks are 15 feet back from that fence. That's the code. So they're not right up there with them trees. I live at 110 Bigelow Street. I saw the balloon. I live 1.2 miles from Cross Point, and they're telling me they need a tower here when they got one here that covers Industrial Ave and gives them all the data they need. Well, it doesn't carry a quarter of a mile. If it's only good, it's not good for a quarter of a mile at Cross Point, why do we need this tower over here? I mean, what is it? And I can understand why you didn't take a picture from Bigelow Street. You can see it clear as day. You can see the balloon. Jervis put a balloon up down his way. He's a mile from my house. I saw it. I don't have them trees in my face. You know, I like to enjoy my yard. And I just want him to understand, I seen the balloon. I can see the balloon to Jervis. I can see the tower. I can see Cross Point. Come on. What's he trying to tell us? We're blind? I don't think so. I passed my vision test. It doesn't make sense for him to say we need this when they got Cross Point there covering Industrial Ave, and they're getting signals there. Covers Marriott, which is the hotel down there, Coca-Cola, Interstate Container, all of those industries, Brooks, Mark I, Transgas, Executive Park. That's all he's talking about for in-house down there. The rest of it's residential. If he goes to Washer Street and co-locate over there, they cover the part of the country they want to cover over there. So why do we need this tower? Is it It's a gap that was manufactured by an RFP put out by the city manager. That's where the gap came. It didn't come because they went out and said, oh, we got this magic meter that says we got a gap. They admitted. The RFP created the gap. If you look at the nice picture he showed us of the greenery, you'll see that the curvature is like this. Woodland Park is in a bowl. I'm up here. They can still see that thing because he's up on the hill. That's why it's a good site. Put it down on the valley. You know, Woodland Park gets the water runoff from up that way. I should tell you right there, the topography, that they're in the bowl. We're going to see that tower. Thank you. And I do appreciate the time you've given us.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else like to speak in opposition? Yes, sir.
My name is George Brooks. I live at 78 Swan Street, Unit 212. My unit is third from the end on Swan Street and backs up directly to the cemetery. First, I'd like to say the photographs are extremely misleading. The photographs were taken extremely close to the fence. If you'll notice, the fence covers up most of it. They're looking directly into fully bloomed trees. Right now, you can stand on my deck, which is only about 2 feet off the ground, and look directly out into the cemetery and see directly over into the area where they're planning to put up the pole. As a matter of fact, I found out about that they were planning to put up this pole originally by the balloon that was out there when I looked out the back. Also, as you look down down towards Building 80, mine's Building 78, Building 80. Building 80 is built on the side of a hill. The back first floor is much higher than it is in the front. Their balconies sit up practically at the top of the trees that are in back of them. So they're going to see that from their balconies very easily. Secondly, I'd like to say I really don't think there's a need for coverage based upon my own experience. I had 2 clients come up for the weekend. One of them sat in my living room and spent his entire time on one of the new HTC G phones from T-Mobile. He demonstrated all of its applications to me, how he could download music and how he could download other applications, and did it successfully. I had him demonstrate it both in my cellar and in my second floor. I later took them both out for dinner. We went through the cemetery, and I made sure he demonstrated it to me there. It worked beautifully. Also, it's a historical sites over in those cemeteries. You can see directly from Jack Kerouac's grave, from the monument to the Indian who did so much for this community, from the graves of the Civil War and Revolutionary War dead, where that monopole is going to stand. There's no way you're going to miss it. Of course, if you take a picture directly into the trees, you're not going to see it. Finally, I'd like to point out that I was driving down to Washington, D.C. a few weeks ago to meet with some colleagues. On the way down, I went through New Jersey, which is not known for its aesthetic qualities. But I did notice that in New Jersey, they had these huge high-tension wires that went along the Jersey Pike. They were built like giant erector sets with 2 arms on either side. On top of the high-tension wires were cell phone antennas. On either side, and they were about every 15th high-tension erector set, let's call it. They had these antennas. Also, on either side of these antenna avenues, they had monopoles that were set back far enough so that they wouldn't fall on the wires. And I just wonder if that had been considered as a possible alternative for antenna sites. Thank you for your time. Good evening.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else like to speak in opposition? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Joanne Snook, and I'm at Unit 361 at Woodland Park, and I've been there for, it will be 23 years in October, when there are no leaves on the trees that we have spoken about this evening. I did see the balloon when it was up, and I was coming home, and I was looking into the cemetery, which the city has done a wonderful job in helping our people who lose relatives and loved ones. It's very attractive. And there was the balloon up. I had no idea what it was, but there it was. And when I came home, because my complex, my unit is in the center section, so that I do have condo units in front of me, and in back of me I have it's grass, and then it overlooks another set of units. And I could see this balloon, and I thought my grandson might like to see it because he loves balloons. Had no idea what it was. I'm really proud of Lowell. I'm proud of what Lowell has done as a city in trying to enhance properties and trying to make Lowell special again. And I can't imagine why, in the interest of technology, we would want to devalue property that people have cared for and have taken care of and love. I think it would devalue our property. I think we would see it, and I don't think it would help our neighborhood. And I would be really unhappy with the city of Lowell if they couldn't find another place that would be adequate and supply all the needs for everyone and maintain the integrity of something that we've kept that means a great deal to us. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else like to speak in opposition? Yes, ma'am.
Robin Crescent, 5 Manning Road, Chelmsford. You probably all realize this, but we're not a very wealthy area. And the fact that we all banded together and hired an attorney to fight for, to fight for something that was very important to us, I hope that you really understand that this is something very, very important to us. We wouldn't be here fighting if we didn't believe in this. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else like to speak in opposition?
If I could just, thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I could just summarize the position. You've heard the unrebutted testimony that the actual use in the area does not show the gap that is projected by computer simulations. And that's the difference. We're talking about, well, science versus science fiction. Very simply, we have a claim of a gap that doesn't exist, actual readings, actual use, actual testimony from actual T-Mobile users that it does not exist. Now, I'm not discounting the possibility that there might be some place in that small neighborhood where phone coverage may not be perfect, where streaming data may not flow easily. But if there is, it certainly is insignificant. This board has in front of it what we call substantial evidence in the legal community, which is the standard for denying these applications. The substantial evidence is the unrebutted actual readings and actual uses from actual customers. T-Mobile has presented no testimony, no logs of dropped calls, no complaints of lack of service in the area, nothing from any users or any subscribers, no actual readings being taken by either their engineer or the peer review engineer to show that there is a gap in coverage, let alone a significant gap, which is the legal standard. What we have is a neighborhood of about 200 some odd homes who have all come in, who have banded together, who have said, this is going to impact our neighborhood. This is clearly visible from my backyard, from my porch, from my front yard, from my bedroom window. This is something that the neighborhood does not want, and which by T-Mobile's own admission in their original application, a gap that can be filled by locating on an existing tower owned by Comcast, a very short distance away, that would cover the heavily populated areas east of the cemetery and leave the relatively minor populated area of residents who have all come here together to say that they don't have a gap, despite what the estimates by computers show, the actual readings show otherwise. I would ask that this board consider the neighborhood, consider the quality of the neighborhood, consider the residents and the taxpayers and what they're looking for, what they think is in best interest of the values of their home, what they think is in the best interest of their community and the character of the neighborhood. This board is empowered to protect neighborhoods, and that's why we have a zoning board made up of residents, not people from Rhode Island, not people from Connecticut,
not people from out of town, not people from Boston. We have residents who are here to look after other residents, and it's within your authority. You have a worksheet that I've provided you. If you find that there is not a significant gap in coverage, if you find that the applicant has not met its constitutional burden of proving not just a claimed gap, but a significant gap, you can deny this. And if you don't want to do that, you can deny it just because the application was incomplete and they didn't give you the required photo simulations, which they signed off in their application they would provide, and yet have failed to on the May date, on the June date, and today in the July date. They've had at least 3 hearings before this board where they have not brought these forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Waker. Anyone else like to speak in opposition? Hearing none, that portion of the public hearing is closed. Anyone here to speak in favor? In favor? In favor? Hearing none, that portion of the public hearing is closed. Mr. Parisi, I guess I'll give you an opportunity now to explain some things.
This site, as you've heard over and over again, has a lot of history. I got involved at the beginning of this year. It's now almost August. I first started talking with the planning department in January. We went over the application requirements. We discussed the requirements. There's no requirement that we put a balloon in the air, but staff suggested that we do it. We did it in conformance with their guidelines. We are not allowed to go on private property as required by your bylaw, so we did the next best thing. After the fact, people invited us onto private property, and now they're complaining that we didn't take it from their bedroom windows. I can't do anything more than the law allows me to do and requires me to do. Now let's talk about the law, because I think there are a lot of misstatements made here tonight. The fact is that we provided a site acquisition affidavit detailing all of the efforts that we have made to date to explore alternatives. We've provided a radio frequency affidavit from a radio frequency engineer who is very credentialed, who explained the process by which he did the analysis to determine the need and the alternatives analysis. We provided coverage maps. You retained a consultant who is very credentialed to look at the data and who agreed with the data that we submitted, which was there was a gap and that there is a need for this tower in this location to provide the requisite coverage that we're trying to achieve. I heard the word uncontroverted. I don't see any credible testimony whatsoever, and I am quite confident that the federal courts will agree with me that there has been any credible testimony other than the fact that there is a substantial gap in coverage. I don't want to even look at the photographs submitted because they have no credibility. And the fact that people say, well, my cell phone worked here, it may work there, one of the things that the planning staff encouraged us to do back at the beginning was to talk to the local neighborhood association. And we talked about it for about an hour, and they said, well, there really isn't a neighborhood association down here. There are other established neighborhood associations in other areas of the city, and other applicants in other areas of the city were encouraged and successful and to have community meetings, but we couldn't find a neighborhood association. And all of a sudden I hear tonight that there's the Manning Field Neighborhood Association. I don't know that that's ever been heard of before, and it certainly wasn't around when I talked to planning staff back in January. The federal courts have been very clear because the federal government has been very supportive of these applications. Council did state correctly that the federal government has said that a zoning board cannot deny this case if the denial would be an effective prohibition. And the federal courts have defined effective prohibition under 2 prongs. One, that there must be a substantial gap in coverage and that there are no feasible alternatives, no reasonable alternatives, and we provided an immense amount of data in the application and the supplemental materials to show that there is a substantial gap in coverage and there is no feasible alternative. The same evidence that we've provided in many other jurisdictions that have denied and have been overturned on appeal. The other thing that you need to look at here is the practical reality. We went to another location, and the City of Lowell, the planning department and the planning board said, no, go sharpen your pencil. So we went and we did sharpen our pencil, and we worked with the City of Lowell to find an alternative. The City of Lowell has signed a lease with us to provide this coverage. If this board were to deny us, essentially the City of Lowell would be suing the City of Lowell on appeal. Unfortunately, there's multiple representatives of the City of Lowell. Actually, I should say fortunately. Fortunately, there are multiple representatives of the City of Lowell. We've been working with planning staff. We've been working with other representatives of the city to find the most appropriate solution. I didn't say it was the perfect solution. I didn't say it was going to be invisible. The bylaw doesn't require it to be invisible. It just requires us to mitigate the visual impact as much as possible. By selecting this location, by modifying the design, by reducing the height from 180 to 150, which is what the original suggestion was, we have done an immense amount to mitigate the visual impact. The federal courts have been very supportive. I've provided information, and I have detailed the requirements of the Telecommunications Act and the limitations of the Telecommunications Act imposes upon boards like you. I'm not saying you have to approve it. I'm not saying you can't deny it. But the board, the federal courts have been very, very clear in what this board can and cannot do. You cannot unreasonably discriminate among functionally equivalent services. Okay, someone has cell phone coverage here, therefore we don't need T-Mobile. The courts have been very specific on that. You can't a denial must be based upon substantial evidence. Photographs of a few bars on a phone has been ruled in other cases, including the town of Westford, that is not substantial evidence. But you do have substantial evidence. You have radio frequency experts testifying, ones that have been retained by us and ones that have been retained by you. There is substantial evidence to support this, and there's no evidence to deny it. The federal courts have been very clear, any denial must be based on substantial evidence. I don't want to threaten an appeal. I don't want to say you have to do this. What I want to say is we have applied for a special permit. We have met the requirements for a special permit. We have met the requirements of your zoning bylaw, or specific with respect to telecommunications facilities. We've provided data, and we would respectfully request that this board approve the application as proposed with the amendments that we submitted tonight.
Mr. Parisi, if I can ask a couple of questions of you, and then I'm going to have a question for DPD. One of the neighbors mentioned about the color of the tower. I know the pictures you showed us from for the stealth design. What color were you thinking about doing with the tower?
The tower itself is like a galvanized steel, a non-reflective gray, which we've determined is the most visually inobtrusive. We can paint it any color you want, but in some instances we've painted them brown and they're more visually intrusive. We could paint them sky blue, but statistics show that the sky is less blue.
Galvanized steel, that's what you
Galvanized steel.
Okay. Another person in the neighborhood talked about historical sites, and I think you kind of talked about historical sites previously. Do you have anything to add to that?
We submitted a report as required by our federal licensing that shows the analysis that we did as to the impact on historic resources. And both the state historic preservation officer and the local historic preservation officer have determined that there's no impact on any historic resources.
And is that within a certain radius, do you know?
I believe they analyze every historic resource within 1 mile.
1 mile?
1 mile.
Okay. Okay. And I'd like to direct a question to Aaron. In regards to the application package, as it relates to the balloon testing that the applicant provided, was there anything, to your knowledge, in the application that they were deficient on as far as the balloon simulations with the neighborhood sites, specifically to the sites that they didn't show any balloon representations.
Your question was that there wasn't enough information in the application to meet that standard? Yeah. There's no requirement for a balloon test in an application. What's required in an application is a photo simulation of the proposed structure from abutting properties in the nearest public ways. So it's, there needs to be an image created. Now, even though it doesn't specifically ask for a balloon test, that's really the best way and only good way to get real evidence on what the height and how the structure is going to look from different vantage points. But as far as the application, it met, from our perspective, the minimum submittal requirements for that.
So you're saying they met the minimum requirements with the balloon testing?
Yes.
Okay, so that means that the sites that they, or the views, I should say, sites and views that they provided, was at their discretion?
Yeah, we don't tell them where to show the simulation from. Basically, what we often get is what they showed. You'll have an analysis where on the public ways you'll see, the colors vary, but I think the green and red is pretty typical. The red is where you would see it from a certain public way, and the green is where you would not be able to see it, or vice versa. And then there would be, up between 5 and 6 simulations, photo simulations from different vantage points to show what that would look like based on that. There's no requirement from the application perspective of having a photo simulation from every single abutting property or public way.
So based on that, and obviously, Ms. Parisi, you can't go back in time to the date March and reproduce showing those, I guess I'll call it the more direct abutter sites that you provided in your updated package. There's no way to go back and reproduce and put the balloon sites in there, correct?
Yes.
What you submitted is what you submitted for your balloon test.
We submitted the requirements of the bylaw. And more so by putting a balloon up in the air. But we can't go back and say,
Okay, thank you. Okay, with that said, I'm going to leave it back to the board now for any final comments or questions they may have. Kevin.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'm just reading my notes from June, and we asked, my notes say we had 3 takeaways. 2 were from the consultant, that we wanted to learn more about the water tower and propagation on it. And secondly, we were looking for more detail and coverage maps, which I think he provided on both. And the third was for the applicant, that we were looking for photo simulations from Woodland Park. Unfortunately, I don't think we got those, whether they're relevant or not. We got photos from Woodland Park, but I don't think we got simulations from photos. To me, a simulation means I'm looking at a water tower in a photo, so it simulates what it's going to look like. Right? Those are from my notes from June 27th, as far as a takeaway. So I just make the comment that I would have liked to have seen the simulations as asked for.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Gary?
No further comments, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, President?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The comments that I will have is that after this few months of hearing these matters, I'm not convinced today that there's a gap in coverage, let alone the sufficient gap in coverage. I also find that there's insufficient visual impact analysis, notably the absence of the photo simulations. Was any simulations from the adjacent properties? And I remember the last meeting we asked that they go back to do a photo simulation. Not showing the tower there is not photo simulations to me. Additionally, I find that this project really, it doesn't serve any social, economic, or the community need of the abutter. I'm prepared to vote for this tonight. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Vesna. Corey.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chairman. Starters, I'd like to thank both sides of this argument. It's been ongoing for a lot of time, and US Wireless, I think for the most part, you've done your due diligence. You've done what this board has asked you for the most part. And the neighborhood, thank you for donating your time as well. But the gist of this, what I get is that, and I'm very, very appreciative of the peer review as well. That's an initial cost, and it's been very, very informative to this board. And I want to say that that's greatly appreciated and informative to especially myself. So with that being said, this peer review was an education in some sense, and I find that the studies that, in my take, that the gap in coverage, is not significant enough to inflict this negative physical character on this neighborhood that may impede real estate values. They may not. I'm no expert. But, I believe we have good voice coverage in this area. The peer review states that. For the most part, we do. I don't think public safety is impeded. I think if any resident at that Swan Street or Woodland Park makes a 911 call, I believe it goes through, in my mind. Again, I'm no expert. Your data coverage, I understand you're trying to improve your data coverage, and that's all great. You're trying to compete, and I don't want to stop. I'm a businessman, too. I wouldn't want to impede anybody from competing in this economy. But what are we upgrading for? For who is my question. We have many businesses on Industrial Ave East, I understand, but I'm thinking they're dependent on landline, not so much wireless. So I don't know who's benefiting here. I don't think really, I think a very small percentages, if at all, is benefiting from this situation, from this. So therefore, that being said, I do not support the petition. Thank you very much for your time on both sides. Thank you.
Thank you, Corey. Marion?
Hi, I also agree. I think US Wireless, you did a great job with your application. You fulfilled most of the things that we required or we asked for. However, I think the issues with this application isn't really pertaining to whether or not T-Mobile could benefit from this area. I think that they can benefit from many different spots that are showing, either from the water tank or Comcast, or even building a new tower in Industrial Ave, or going over there on a structure there if they needed to get coverage to comply with the FCC or Telecommunications Act. I just don't think that you have enough need for the tower by that standard. However, if there was a need for a clear wire, a Comcast or a Time Warner or any other tenant that you're marketing, I then think that the more need you show from the different tenants might make this a more suitable site. But since T-Mobile can actually, since it's only one tenant, and T-Mobile can go to all these different sites, including the water tank, and where they might have more coverage in areas that are more needed. Like right now, by going here, it seems like you're really covering an area that will never be needed. It's a cemetery. If you go over by Comcast, you might be needed there. If you go by the water tank, T-Mobile will go there. Unfortunately, US Wireless, I'm not so sure you're going to be needed any other places. So I think as a tower build, it's not a good site. But T-Mobile coverage lacking will be actually better if they go in all these different spaces or in multiple spaces. So maybe, if I'm wrong, I don't think it's shown to us that way. I think the consultant report shows pretty well that if T-Mobile goes to Comcast, they get a pretty good coverage area over here. If they go to, the water tank, they get a big coverage area. The gaps that they're showing don't seem to be significant enough gaps for T-Mobile. If another carrier came along that isn't anywhere else, and then there's not space for them because T-Mobile has taken up those spots, then maybe perhaps this might be a good site. But to me, it's not a good site for just having T-Mobile. I hope that's clear enough for everybody.
Thank you, Marion. Dennis?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I still feel that T-Mobile, that your group has inadequately shown that the gap in coverage is strong enough, exists, and I just don't feel the information presented has really supported that. So I'm not sure that the gap exists. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And so I guess based on each of the comments of the board members, there's a few things that, you know, I've taken in this whole process. This has always been, anything to do with these telecommunication facilities always becomes a challenge for this board because of the technical nature to begin with. And, but putting all that to the side and listening to the input of the neighborhood, listening to the input of the applicant, and considering what DPD has also done on it. You know, I've looked at a couple of different things in regards to this petition. And, you know, we've heard things about coverage gaps, technology, aesthetics, and balancing these all out, I think, is a real challenge for this board. I've also heard a lot about federal court, substantial evidence. There's nobody on this board that is presently a lawyer to my effect, and to hear about the court of law and what the federal government can and cannot do, I appreciate and I am sensitive to my readings on this also. As far as the peer review went, I believe the peer review addressed substantially most of the issues or questions that this board had. And I appreciate your input, sir, for providing that to this board. I've also heard things about reliable coverage versus significant gap. I still think there's a balance also there. It seems, a lot of it seems to be, some of it's technologically measured, other is subjective. I think, Mr. Parisi, one thing you did mention was, you were talking about nobody shows up or has shown up to support the project. And I appreciate the comments that you made on there. But yet, I would think if there were, you know, customers of T-Mobile that really felt strongly that they were not receiving, especially the type of coverage that you are proposing, I would have thought at least one person would have shown up, that I would be very sensitive to listening to what they had to say about that. But I do understand you were trying to make a relationship to Dunkin' Donuts with drive-thrus. I don't know if that was a correct analogy, but I understood where you were coming with that. You know, I looked at this again. This is a TSF zoned neighborhood. And the character of the residential neighborhood includes single-family dwellings, a cemetery, a ball field, which we really didn't talk too much about, the ball field in general. And I look at that area as a true neighborhood, even with the buffering of the trees, which I know I kind of asked you a few questions around the trees, and I believe the peer review talked about density and its impact. We also talked about the technology that T-Mobile has, and there seems to be limitations on the type of technology that they have. So I don't believe putting up a monopole is part of a traditional neighborhood. Also, the number of residents that continually showed up in opposition, I think this board has to strongly consider. So based on all of that, you know, I would recommend denial. And if I look at section 11.3.2 for the criteria, I believe the adverse effects do outweigh the benefits of the neighborhood in view to the particular characteristics of the site. So with that, does anyone have any other comments?
Could I ask a question? Would the board be amenable to perhaps continuing to consult with counsel, the board's counsel, before, and the city solicitor before?
No, I'm not going to entertain that, sir. That's...
Maybe I could speak with counsel.
I'm sorry?
Maybe I could speak with the board's counsel.
No,
because it becomes a legal issue. And
well, I'm not here to, there's nobody here from legal counsel representing the city here. So I'm not going to entertain that. So with that, Mr. Clerk.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
I'll
make a motion to approve.
I have a second.
Second it.
Roll call.
I'm sorry, could you read that, repeat the motion, please? I just didn't hear it.
A motion to approve.
Motion to approve?
Yeah.
Okay. And
Waring. Did you get the second?
Yep. Mr. Bailey?
Denied.
Mr. Belanger?
Deny.
Mr. Ahern?
Deny.
Mr. Noon?
Deny.
Mr. Perrin?
Denied.
So, sir, you've been denied by a vote of 5-0. Thank you very much, and thank you for the residents for showing up. Thank you.
Let's get it done, huh? We got one left.
You guys need 5 minutes to stretch or pee break time?
Yeah, just chat them. Yeah. One left, yeah.
I need 5 minutes just to put all this stuff away.
Organized. Holy Jesus. Is that the right language when the census is going to be denied and motion approved? That's what it is.
Okay, our final petition is under continuances. This is ZB 2011-17, and the petition is for a special permit and variance. The applicant is Hancock Associates, property located at 94 Chatham Street, and the petition is to demolish a single-family dwelling and construct a new single-family that exceeds the current structure's footprint and without sufficient lot area, pursuant to Section 4.5.7 of the zoning code. A representative of Hancock Associates, please address the board. Hi, sir.
Good evening, Chairman and members of the board. Again, my name is Matt Hammer. I'm with Hancock Associates, here for a continued hearing for 94 Chatham Street. And I want to let you know that we've taken all the comments from the last hearing. We've revised a full set of architectural plans that you now have before you, which is a 8-sheet plan set, which we've submitted to the board. We've updated our site plan to show the deck off the rear of the building, as well as the as well as the front protrusion off the front of the building. We've added additional windows. We've added more detail to the architect plans. We've received a letter back today from the planning department as well, reiterating that we have what I see is complied with all the recommendations that came from the planning department as well as the board.
Okay. Yeah, and in our summary that we received from DPD, they pretty much outlined the changes that you made from the original set of plans that we received. I just want to read some of them into the record just so people know about it. The elevations provided match the layout of the proposed site plan. The applicant has indicated a proposed deck and porch, which I believe we had talked about at the last meeting.
We did, yeah.
Anyways. 5 additional new windows. Now it says along the sides, again, when you face the property, is that on the right-hand side or the left? Just so
It's
we're
the
specific.
right-hand side.
Right-hand side, okay. The gable dormer located to the right of the entryway has been removed. The box cornice details have been replaced. The access door to the garage has been moved from the front to the rear of the property, includes a 12-foot wide garage door. A porch landing area on the front facade of the house, and windows on the front facade on the ground floor and second floor under the gable dormer include additional window decorative framework. Have you, I know some of the neighbors, I know there's a few here tonight, have they seen any of the changes that you've gone through?
I did speak with one of the abutters
Okay.
before the hearing. He had seen them. I would like to add that we called the owner of the house also to talk to some of the neighbors, and we're not sure if she actually did get around to all the neighbors. We did make an attempt to do that through the property owner, seeing how she had known the neighbors more than us.
Okay. And then under the section of proposed changes, one thing I'll just bring up there, they talked about the elevations provided by the applicant and have not been stamped.
Yeah, we actually further discussed this with with Joe Janowitz as well. And actually, it's not a requirement to have the drawings stamped because the designer does have a supervisor's license, which that was reconfirmed with the state board today. And we did contact back with Joe today to have him know that as well.
Okay. Were you prepared to give us any detail before?
I can. I just
Yeah,
didn't have
I'd like to just, if you could walk me through the changes that you've made. Yep. Yeah. Can I interrupt you for a second? Ma'am, can you see this at all, or, well? Yeah. We'll move over there, and the podium will be in the way.
Okay, there we go. We've added some more detail here with the front entranceway here, also showing to scale the proposed garage as well on that elevation. Like I said, we've spent a lot of time with these drawings. We have a full architectural plan set now. So every side of the building has elevations. So if you're looking, facing the building looking from the left-hand side, we have the proposed deck off the rear, as well as the front porch here with the steps. Looking at the building from from the right-hand side, we show the same thing here with the front porch and the deck. We added some more windows to that side as well, which was a comment. And we have full floor plans as well, showing the location and the dimensions of all the rooms in the house. And I would like to add that this building is just over 1,700 square feet. So I just wanted to clarify that in terms of the scale of the building. And sometimes they look really big in elevation, but an actual floor plan is 1,760 square feet. Yes.
That's livable? You're talking about livable space? Does
Yes,
that include the
livable
garage
space.
also, or not? No?
It's not the
Okay.
garage.
Correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we just feel that though this is a, there's been a lot of time and effort put into this design, and that, you know, we've met with the planning department going over these changes, and feel as though that, you know, we have a better building, I think, because of it, and we feel as though that this is going to be a great addition to the neighborhood.
Okay. So, maybe I got the old set of plans. You mentioned the right-hand side of the property had 5 windows now, right? I want to make sure I'm looking at because the one I have in front of me says right side.
Right side has 3 here,
Yeah.
Chairman, and the opposite side has 4.
Oh, okay. I thought we were talking about adding the extra windows.
Well, we have a garage on this side too, so we put some windows in the garage here.
I'm struggling with the paperwork.
We have 2 windows in the garage, and because the garage takes up most of the second floor space here,
Oh, I'm sorry.
okay, with the gable,
Features an additional 5 windows along the sides, so you're talking both left and right side.
yes.
Okay.
So if you see the gables
Yep.
here, which is hard to see, we're able to put a window in here.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but was the original plans was either the left or the right, only showed like 1 window at the time? If I remember right?
Yes, I believe
Okay.
so,
Yep,
yes.
okay.
Yeah.
And I think, if I can just speak, this gentleman here, when you face this structure, are you to the right of it? Yep.
Yep.
Now, there's a fence that runs, you might have mentioned this, there's a fence that runs on the right-hand side of the property. Is it like a chain link fence right now? And do you own the fence? Okay. And to the left of the property, I believe there's a fence there too, isn't it? Oh, stone wall, yeah. Is the stone wall owned by this property or the next door neighbor? Do you know that, sir?
It's owned by the next door neighbor.
Next door neighbor, okay. And at the rear of the property, are you proposing any fencing, or is there already a fence up there?
We're not proposing any fencing there.
Yeah. Is there a fence there right now? There is, okay, thank you.
Yes, there is. There's a stockade fence.
Okay.
It's
And
shown
that fence,
here.
that
This
fence
is-
must be owned by the people on the other,
Yep, this
the
is the
neighboring
house
back.
to the rear, and
Yep.
there's a fence right here.
Yep, okay. Okay, so as far as the, you mentioned 1,700 square feet, so the footprint, there's no change to the footprint since the last, since your first meeting before us, correct?
That's correct.
Same footprint, okay. Okay, I'm going to open it up to, do you have anything else you want to add, sir?
No,
Yep,
that's...
okay. I'm going to open it up to the public. Anyone here to speak in opposition to this petition? Yes, sir.
Hi, my name's Tom Sutherland, 104 Chatham Street.
Yep.
I think my biggest concern is when we left last time, the board had said to them it might be wise to speak to the abutters. I never heard a word from anybody. I
Okay.
stumbled across the plans on the internet. I still think the house is too big for the lot. I would have liked to speak with someone just to go over some things if the construction becomes a reality of things that are go on. My driveway is right there on their driveway. I mean, do my vehicles have to be moved every day? But those are questions that I had for them, and I was very disappointed that I didn't hear from somebody.
Okay.
When they came with the first plan with the garage on the left, I said, okay, that was just something, and now it's on the right. But then we have, nobody contacted us. I was unable to speak with my neighbors about it also, because like I say, I just came across these now. And as construction moves forward, I just want to make sure that, we're aware of anything we need to do.
In regards to the, I'll call it the footprint or the size of the proposed structure, what is your concern, sir?
Well, my house is definitely not the Taj Mahal, but we have a very nice side yard there.
Yep.
And we do a lot of entertaining out there, and I just don't want to be looking at a big wall.
So does it have more to do where the structure will be sited?
If I was just to speak out, I'd say there are 2 houses up the street without a garage that I believe are 3 bedrooms.
Yep.
I think those are appropriate.
Yep. Okay, anything else you want to add, sir?
No, that's really it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I add something, Chairman?
Let me just see if...
Standing here.
Okay, sure.
I did recommend that, we could meet with the neighbor, maybe a pre-construction meeting of some sort, just to get some clarification to make sure the dumpster is not going to interfere with his parking or anything of that nature, as well as the construction vehicles.
Yep. Okay. Anyone else like to speak in opposition? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Ellen Wallace. I live at 109 Chatham, which is diagonally across from the house in question. The whole thing just seemed like we were being rushed into something. I found a couple of things that were very offensive to me, because somebody said to me, "Don't worry, it'll be built whether you like it or not." And that was not the question. First of all, these were our neighbors for many years. And I said that for reasons known only to them, they are no longer our neighbors. But they are leaving a neighborhood where they objected to the same kind of thing happening. One of our neighbors had a lot. She wanted to put 2 houses on it. Well, they're closing you in and closing you in. There's no green space left. And I said, it's just very upsetting. Because I said, and then people move in, they move out, they've made something that looks a mess, and they leave it for you. And I said, we have a nice neighborhood. We have good neighbors, for the most part. But I said, I just hate the idea of them doing what they did. They never said a word to anybody in the neighborhood. Now, if I were moving, I would tell them, I'm leaving here. And so that was my main objection to it, that nobody is going to force me to do anything I don't want to do. And I don't like the idea of somebody pointing a finger at me to begin with. So, like I said, that's my main concern, and I was concerned for Tom too, because he's going to be right beside it.
Okay.
At least I have a little bit. I only look at his house. So, thank you very much for your time.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else like to speak in opposition? In opposition? Hearing none, that portion of the public hearing is closed. Anyone here to speak in favor? In favor? In favor? Hearing none, that portion of the public meeting is closed. So I guess to this gentleman's point about the size of the structure, and that's why I wanted to ask about the footprint. I think we kind of talked about that, and I believe at that time, I know this gentleman hasn't come before the board tonight, but I think there was concerns about saleability and a buyer, and so is that the real reason why the size of the footprint?
Yes, there was a how my client came into the property is they looked at the property, they found a real estate married a buyer to the property with a design. And that's how we came in before you with the design that we had. They were in a tentative offer, and they've been waiting patiently to have the house that they agreed to have built for them to be built on this property. It's not a spec house where a developer's building the property and then putting it for sale.
Right. And the current owners, they don't live at the, they don't live there anymore? Is there anybody living in that
No.
residence? Yep. Okay. So as far as the plan submitted again, with the changes, the footprint, you're proposing to keep the same footprint?
Yes, it is.
Yep. Okay. All right, I'm going to open it up to the board. Kevin, any comments, questions?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I guess my comments are, I understand what the neighborhood's saying. It's a big house for the neighborhood. The unfortunate part is the economics of the situation. I mean, the house is in disrepair. Something needs to be done now. Revamping the house at the size, the cost that would go into it, unfortunately, it just doesn't make sense for anybody, developer or what have you, to come in and do that. I don't think they could recoup their money, and I don't think it would be worth somebody to come in, buy it, and redo it for themselves, because I think the cost of the lot, and as it is to reconstruct, would be overbearing as far as what it would be worth. So based on that, I don't know that there's an alternative other than maybe a split entry or something like that, but unfortunately, they have somebody with a plan that they've kind of designed and already agreed to. So the height of the building is going to be tall. I mean, I know that the one behind it is tall, but unfortunately, I think that's the nature of what's going to happen as things are rebuilt. It's going to be bigger houses that are 2 or 3 bedrooms for families and things of that nature, which it is a family neighborhood. So those are my only comments.
Thank you, Kevin. Gary?
Just a couple of quick notes through you, Mr. Chairman. I did notice that you did take the gable dormer located in the right entry has been removed.
Say it again.
In item number 4, the gable dormer located to the right entry has been removed.
That's correct.
Okay. The other comments that were brought up by the abutters, is there any particular reason why they weren't contacted from last meeting to this meeting?
We contacted the property owner. She had told us that she was going to talk to the people in the neighborhood, and we were really relying on her because she knew the people in the neighborhood to talk to them.
Isn't it my understanding that no one's living there at this time?
No, but she was there a month ago.
Sir, if you can, anytime you have anything, I'm going to have to ask you to come to the mic. Okay, thank you.
She was living there a month ago, and she was coordinated through Mr. Ireland, as well as the representing our real estate agent as well, to coordinate that with the owner. And we were relying on her to help facilitate some of the interactions with the neighbors.
And with that reliance, was there any follow-up through either the builder, the real estate agency, or anybody? Was there any follow-up to the neighbors at that time, or is it just open space?
We can't speak to that. I personally do not know.
Okay.
I wasn't specifically involved in the coordination. But I know that it did happen. I did talk to the real estate agent involved, and it did happen, so.
No more comments, Mr.
Okay,
Chairman.
Gary. Vesna?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm very disappointed that there's no change in the footprint, downside it, because you don't have to look far. The house behind that, and you walk that street and you look at the house next door to the one that's behind the proposed house, it's really not the same. It has changed that neighborhood, and this certainly will do so. I guess I understand a business, a realtors and real estate person, bottom line, that's all they care about. You know what? The people who live in the neighborhood stuck with it. and they the one who impact by it. And the other thing I'm disappointed that you know there's no communication with the resident. I know that you left it with the owner to talk to the resident, but from what you're saying that yes, you left with the owners, but there's no follow-up, no information before this board tonight that she spoke to the neighborhood, the neighbors, and this is the neighbors have changed their position on this. There's none of that. I didn't hear any of that. All I heard is 3 residents come forward, and the rest may be scared away. I'm not sure. I'm just guessing. But I'm for one thing, I'm sure is that this is too big. This house is too big, and it certainly is going to change the character of the neighborhood. And one of the conditions for variance that if I find that this is really changed the character of the neighborhood, I can vote deny it tonight, and I'm prepared to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Vesna. Corey?
Yes, to you, Mr. Chairman. For starters, I would like to echo Mr. Noon's comments regarding, because it was me that made the comment before I made the motion to continue, so you could work further on this project, was to notify the neighborhood. And, you know, it's not the elderly woman's job in that house. This is your project. It was your job to notify the neighborhood and speak with them. I thought I made that clear. And this isn't a direct abutter who seems to be still out in the cold. Okay, so I'm not very appreciative of that. I must let you know. But the gist of this thing is, you know, the current condition of the property is very dilapidated. Do I think this is the perfect home? Not so much. But I think if we let the situation drag on, if it's unoccupied with this current market, I think the neighborhood and the abutters stand to lose more in its current condition, rather than a new home being built. So altogether, I do support the project. But I think the neighborhood long-term property values stand to gain more than what can potentially happen here if this gets denied. So that's a big concern of mine. So in the gist of it, I do support it. But please, if this does get approved, it's your responsibility, not anybody else's. This is your project, to sit down with this abutter, keep him informed of the goings-on there. Do I make myself clear?
Yeah, you do, Mr. Belanger. And I would like to add that we did try to talk with the abutters outside the hearing, after the last hearing, and it just got to the point where they were being it just wasn't, there was no synergy there in terms of those discussions, and we just felt as though it was better suited with the property owner.
Well, that's because they weren't
notified
notified in the first place, and that's probably the reason. So it's justifiable. So
I understand that.
I do support your project. I think it's going to be a nice home when it's all said and done. I think in the end, the neighborhood's going to be happy in time. So I do support it, and please communicate with the neighbors. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Corey. Marion?
Hi. To me, I agree. I think what's already there is not a very nice neighborhood home. A new home being built could potentially be better for you. It's too bad that you couldn't come so far together, but it does sound like he will set up a pre-construction meeting with you to discuss it. And I also feel bad for you that your neighbor didn't call you and discuss with you. It wasn't a very nice neighborly thing to do. Hopefully the new neighbors who seem very excited about moving into this home will be nicer neighbors to you, and you will end up having a better relationship with them from it. To me, because the home behind it is so big, it doesn't necessarily affect your view if you're in the backyard, because you're already seeing that other house. I don't know if that makes sense, but hopefully your neighbors, hopefully it won't be a big wall. I mean, I totally understand where you're coming from, having a big wall next to you, but I mean, it's either a new home that's built that could be nice to view at, or, you know, the current dilapidated home that may not ever change, which over time could get worse. So I hope a pre-construction meeting will help out with the neighborliness of this new home being built, and then it can be a supportive product, you know, a new house across all boards. Because you did do a very good, I think the new plans are much better than what the other plans were. It's shown that you worked well with the DPD, and that's, to me, progress. So just one more step progress would be nice for the pre-construction meeting, and that would be my support of the project.
Thank you, Marion. Dennis?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too am disappointed in the communication, but I do think a lot of great progress has been made here. I'd like to point out the new house, the garage is giving you a side yard that's more than double what you currently have. So there are some real benefits to this design versus what currently exists on the site. And there's a nice, even though it is a big house in the front, by the way, zoning does allow a maximum height of 32 feet on this site. So that's, I mean, if you were to use that existing house, potentially you could build up a bigger wall. But in any event, I think having the setback on the front yard of 20 feet versus what currently exists in one corner is about 5 feet is going to make the size of the house not quite as imposing on the street because it's set further back. But I especially think that the large gable being removed from the front of the house softens that street edge again to minimize the impact on the street, and the porch in the front will do that as well. The windows on the sides of the house are a huge bonus because, again, they don't feel like bland walls that you're looking at. So I think a lot of progress has been made, and I think that you should be commended for the effort you put in, aside from the lack of communication with the neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. So as far as the current structure goes, you're going to demolish the existing building, and are you using the existing foundation? You're not, because you're going to go back, you're going to push the house back to Dennis's point. Now, sir, your residence, doesn't yours sit back as opposed to on the street? Yeah. Yeah. Do you have a regular driveway, or do you have like a?
Mine's just a paved driveway, but it's right next to that chain.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So with that said, the new proposal is to push the house back. So you were mentioning about, I guess, if you were sitting.
Probably a non-issue.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think based on, the communication with the neighborhood obviously is unfortunate. I don't think, the petitioner coming in, I mean, the person that owns the property, they had a communication with them. Unfortunately, I guess it was unneighborly of them not speaking to you people, but I have to believe that the new construction and new structure will aesthetically for the neighborhood look much better. I think it's a great street because I think there's a combination of homes on that street. And it's a nice, quiet street, and I can't see this new structure being a detriment. I mean, I think there's going to be a change in, obviously, size. I don't know what kind of feelings you had for the property that was built behind, but that had nothing to do with this board. But I think if you go up and down Chatham Street, there's a good mix and blend of homes on that street, and I really believe, and I think the board members believe, that, it'll only add to the character of the neighborhood. We do understand your concerns, though. But with that said, and the thing with the housing market, I mean, obviously, that's nothing we can control, and I know you can't control either, and I'm sure you've seen many changes over the many years you've been in that neighborhood, right? So, does anybody else have any other comments? Nope? Okay. So, Mr. Clerk.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Excuse me, before you do that, I don't think I heard anything about any conditions.
I don't believe so, no.
Aaron, there's nothing to your, so the thing about the stamping, we already got past that, correct?
Yeah.
No, the only thing I would ask is that the elevations be signed, because there's no date, there's no way to reference the plans or elevations.
That was on your last point.
I know that's just typical for the board. Anyway.
I don't know. Interference request.
You might want to wait till they vote.
Yeah, conditioned that the plan submitted for building permit shall not deviate from the latest revision submitted to and approved by the board. Is that something else in relation? This is on This is number 2, where you talked about the elevations provided by the applicant, not but stamped, but then further on that same paragraph, we recommend that any approval include a condition. The plan submitted for a building permit shall not deviate from the latest revisions.
Yeah, a decision from the Zoning Board of Appeals, anytime that you approve something that's based on an elevation, any plans that's submitted to the board for consideration,
Yep.
the reference in that decision, and therefore the building permit application, the floor plan, and the elevation should be the same as what you've been approved. You can add a condition on to that. What we're recommending is just to make sure that it's clear to the applicant and tighten that up. But just the process of signing the plans, and usually we would have a revision date with any kind of building plans that we can reference in the decision letter. So in this case, a condition would help, but also having the plans signed themselves for the record, showing that's what is being approved.
Okay, so you,
What's the language going to be there?
sorry. So as far as a condition, are you suggesting, are you recommending that we tie it around the elevation, or are you saying it's not required because it's going to be signed off?
I would say my recommendation is go ahead and make the condition so it's clear. I think that's something that would be valuable moving forward. Yes.
No, the stamping has, he just wants to speak to the elevations. Right. Well, we don't want to say that. Think it's been a long night? Okay. You just, so the condition is the elevations need to be signed?
No, the condition would be that the plans submitted for a building permit include elevations and building plans that are substantially similar to what has been approved.
Yep.
Or I'm assuming you're going to approve.
So it's pretty much that last sentence that I was rereading. You just...
You could, if
saying a
you
little
wish
bit
to use that, that's fine.
He's talking about this here. No.
Okay, let's give it a whirl. It's been a long night, as the chairman stated. Make a motion to approve with the following condition, that the plans submitted for a building permit include elevation and building included in plan?
Building plan and elevation.
Building plan elevation, okay.
Okay. Do
I'll
I
second that.
have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. A roll call?
Mr. Bailey?
Approve with conditions.
Mr. Belanger?
Approve with conditions.
Mr. Ahern?
Approve with conditions.
Mr. Noon?
Deny.
Mr. Perrin?
Approve with conditions.
Sir, you've been approved by a vote of 4-1, and is there anything that they need to sign, Aaron?
If they could sign the elevations and the site plan, I'd appreciate it.
And to the neighbors that showed up, we appreciate you coming and expressing your concerns. And hopefully everything works out.
Yep. And perhaps you ought to exchange information tonight. You ought to exchange cell numbers tonight. It's probably a good idea.
Oh, let's have other business. Let's have 10 items on the other business.
Thank you.
Yep.
Very much.
Good luck.
Yep.
No,
I actually...
Yeah, but this is the one that, the signatures is so we know what is approved. Let's get a date on here. Could you sign it?
I do that enough. I don't need another 2 o'clock night.
Yeah.
Okay, Matt, thank you very much. Thanks, folks.
So, Mr. Clerk, any
There's
other...
no other business, Mr. Chairman, so I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I guess, yes.
Minutes for review and approval.
I didn't see them. I didn't see them on the agenda for
They're not on the agenda, I'm pretty sure they were. Okay.
other business.
Not on there, never mind then.
Yep.
Need a second?
Second motion to adjourn.
Okay, approved?
Aye.
Aye.
Yeah. Have a good night.